Und weil der Mensch ein Mensch ist, drum braucht er was zum Essen, bitte sehr. Es macht ihn ein Geschwätz nicht satt, das schafft kein Essen her.
Rum, links, zwei, drei, rum, links, zwei, drei, wo dein Platz genossen ist. Weil ich heim in die Arbeit einheimst und weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Und weil der Mensch ein Mensch ist, drum hat der Stiefel im Gesicht nicht gern. Er will unter sich keinen Sklaven sehen und über sich keinen Herrn.
Drum links, zwei, drei, drum links, zwei, drei, wo dein Platz genossen ist. Weil ich heim in die Arbeit einheimst und weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Und weil der Prolet ein Prolet ist, drum wird ihn kein anderer befreien. Es kann die Befreiung der Arbeiter nur das Werk der Arbeiter sein.
Drum links, zwei, drei, drum links, zwei, drei, wo dein Platz genossen ist. Weil ich heim in die Arbeit einheimst und weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Здравствуйте, comrades. Welcome to another episode of Socialism Saturday. Socialism Saturday is our advanced course in all things far left dystopia, where we find a random and hopefully obscure, and I think I've hit the obscure part on the head this week. We watch a random socialist conversation training. I mean, we're talking about the real deal here. We're not talking about AOC. We're not talking about Bernie Sanders. Those are champagne socialists. We're not talking about CNN style socialism. We are talking about the farthest of the far left, the most dystopian of the dystopian, the professed socialists, the professed Marxists, the professed communists. And we listen to what they have to say and we talk about it. And the reason that we watch Socialism Saturday is because we want to actually know what the enemy is thinking, what their beliefs are, not the bullshit gotcha games that come up in politics, but their actual beliefs. Because if we're honest about it, their actual beliefs are much scarier than anything that the right runs around and says Marxism, like Mark Levin and his American Marxism books have no effing idea what's actually going on the farthest of the far left, but we do, because we sit our asses down once a week for Socialism Saturday and we watch them and we listen to them and we have a few drinks and we have a few laughs and we even talk about it along the way. And I got to be honest, guys, we were going to watch something different. Up until a couple hours ago, I had picked out a presentation from the Andrea Mitchell Center for Democracy at the University of Pennsylvania, which is one of my favorite socialist groups. So yes, the Andrea Mitchell, as in the NBC News lady, and Andrea Mitchell has a center at the University of Pennsylvania where they do a whole series where they bring in some of the best socialist activists in the country to talk about why we should embrace their ideas. And I had actually picked out a presentation from the Andrea Mitchell Center for Democracy and Journalism, or whatever it's called, where they were going to be talking about Martin Luther King and racial capitalism. I was like, oh, this actually sounds like something we should probably watch at some point. And I do want to go back and watch it at some point. However, I was trolling around the YouTubes about an hour ago, and I found something that I think is going to be even better. I stumbled upon an obscure YouTube channel with less than 1,000 subscribers for a radical socialist bookstore that does talks about socialist books all the time. Now, one of the things that I really have to respect the socialists for, because they've got some game on this, and when I'm saying this, this is like Antifa level shit, is what we're going to be watching tonight. This is like these are the places where Antifa is bred. Okay, what these people have done is they really do have bookstores like all over the country. I have a whole effing list of their bookstores in which they bring people in, they have classes about what they believe, they talk about what they believe, they make this a part of their life, they make this a part of their culture, they build community around it. And I just happened to stumble across one of their YouTube channels today. This is for something called Firestorm Co-op. It has less than 1,000 subscribers. Let's just read. We are a collectively owned, anytime you see collective, think socialist, radical bookstore and community event space in Asheville, North Carolina. Since 2008, we've supported grassroots movement in Southern Appalachia while developing a workplace on the basis of cooperation, empowerment, and equity. As a queer feminist collective, we feature books and events that reflect our interests and the needs of marginalized communities in the South. We strive to promote exploration and encounter by maintaining a welcome, sobering, anti-oppressive space. Well, let's look at some of the videos that this here. I have a feeling we're going to be watching a lot of their videos, guys. I have a feeling about this. We've got Surviving the Future, abolitionist queer strategies. I absolutely want to go like that. That just looks like a train wreck right there if I've ever seen one. In fact, let me just add that to my watch later list right now. We've got The Radical Imagination of Sex Workers. Where do we go where they go? The story of anti-racist action. Feminists for Patriarchy, TERFs and the Far Right. Abolition in Practice, the George Floyd Uprising, which is what they call the summer of 2020, the George Floyd Uprising. They've got all sorts of crazy shit on this channel, guys, but the one that we are going to watch today, and I just, want to say you're welcome at the outset. We're going to be watching a presentation called Let's Abolish Adult Supremacy. So you guys know that one of my absolute favorite topics to watch on Socialism Saturday, because it is the most dystopian thing that I've ever seen in my life. This is like real life dystopia in action, is Abolish the Family. Coaster Trek, you've been watching me long enough to know better on this one, Coaster Trek, so I'm going to make an example of this. Sounds like straight white males aren't allowed to their socialist business. No. Wrong. In fact, Coaster Trek, you're going to see there's at least a white male. I don't know if he's straight, but there's definitely a white man in this here presentation. Stop saying this shit. I mean, I guess you can say it, but if anyone who watches my content on a regular basis still believe that that straight white men are the victims of the world and that the far left just hates straight white men and they want to get rid of straight white men, Coaster Trek, you've been around, buddy, and I appreciate your support. I really do. But you know better than this. That's not the truth. The far left do not care if you're straight. They do not care if you are white. And they do not care if you're a man. They care that you agree with their political ideology, and that is it. Socialists love straight white men who agree with them. They hate trans black women who disagree with them. It has nothing to do with any of your immutable characteristics. And every single time you guys make it about straight white men are the oppressed victims of the world, you are doing exactly what they want you to do. You are missing the point entirely. And we reviewed this many, many times. And I guess we still need to continue to review it. So fine. Anyway, we are going to be watching today. Let's abolish adult supremacy. Youth oppression is part of the machine that keeps the forces of empire together. The deepening hold of capitalism on everyday lives has made it more difficult than ever to imagine and enact social change and autonomy. Even when kids live in radical and supportive homes, they still face oppression and adult supremacy in their encounters with other adults. Solidarity begins at home with the human and more than human beings we depend on. From this perspective, Trust the Kids Stories on Youth Autonomy and Confronting Adult Supremacy is about amplifying stories and actions that reveal the liberatory potential of undoing the social borders that cut us off from each other and the world. Adults must contend with their personal and social power while actively work to undo adult supremacy. This constructed and often violent social border between adults and kids is a massive barrier to youth autonomy. Unbuilding these walls will take a fierce commitment from all of us. In doing so, we will provide beautiful openings for us to create a truly intergenerational just future, one where we can all flourish and thrive more. Because as long as there are seeds of hierarchy in any of our relationships, justice will not take root and bloom. Yasmin was just watching the 50 Shades of Grey trilogy. Yasmin, the only acceptable movie in that trilogy is the first one. The other two suck. The first one's pretty good, though. I'm going to be honest, and I don't care who knows it. The first movie's awesome. It is. Anyway. So then we got some people who are so this one is the founder of Queer Media, a family production company specializing in audio video, blah 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 blah. We've got Stacy, a child abuse survivor from a foster home. Okay. We've got Toby. Toby is an associate professor of political science at Lakehead University. So it's really great to know that we have a good representative from higher education, an actual professor at an actual university talking about why don't we abolish adult supremacy. His interests focus on the democratic theory, the history of political thought, disability, and childhood. He has published on the intersections of childhood and race, colonialism, feminism, and contemporary democratic policies. Definitely not a socialist at all. Zach, him, is an artist, writer, and record label owner. And Carla Joy, who is they, is a joyarchist who dabbles in poetry, writing, and storytelling. Indeed, indeed. We are watching a presentation today, guys, that less than 600 people have watched. And we are going to watch this presentation and we're going to talk about it. So welcome to Socialism Saturday. I'm really glad you're here. If this is your first time at Socialism Saturday, I haven't watched this bookstore yet, and so I don't know exactly how word salady they're going to be. Generally speaking, if this is your first time here, if you're relatively new, a couple of things. Number one, if they sound like they're speaking English, but you don't understand what they're saying, it's not you, it's them. Socialists speak in code. They speak in a code that only they understand. Many of us, because we have now been watching Socialism Saturday for over 10 months, we have learned how to speak socialist. We've learned how to speak socialist through osmosis. And so if you have questions about what they're saying because it just sounds crazy to you, make sure you ask them in the chat. And either I or other members of the chat who've been listening for a while will be able to explain it. I will do my very best to decode for you. But always remember that I'm not a socialist. I speak socialist pretty well at this point, but I'm still learning alongside all of you. I don't have to have all the good ideas. So I will do my very best to translate. But I'm looking for people in the chat who are regulars of Socialism Saturday to help out as well. If you have ideas about what they're saying and what they're getting at, please let us know. Let's all share in the wealth. We are all learning together here. And so we have to, keep a nice congenial environment in the chat to be able to do that. On that note, I do not have an unmoderated chat. I do have 2 rules in my chat because we do treat this as a learning environment where we are all watching this really complicated information and trying to decode it and trying to decipher it and trying to be intellectually honest about what we're doing. So I have 2 rules in my chat to make that possible. Number 1, don't be a dick. I don't care if you want to joke in the chat. I don't care if you want to, make snide remarks in the chat, but you will not insult me. You will not insult other people in the chat. If you can go elsewhere on the internet and insult us, I don't really care, but you won't do it here because it is distracting from what we're trying to do. And I don't think it's too much to ask people to act like adults when we're actually supposed to be in a learning environment here. So number 1, don't be a dick. Number 2, no whining. If I ask you to stop doing something, just stop doing it. I don't want to hear arguing. I don't want to hear back talk. I don't want to hear complaining. I don't want to hear, Carolyn, I'm not doing that thing you told me to stop doing, because you are doing that thing I told you to stop doing. If you weren't doing it, I wouldn't have told you to stop doing it in the first place. Exactly. This is Socialism Saturday is like an AP class, guys. It's an advanced class. This is a time where we put on our big boy and girl pants and we rein in our inner shit posters and we act like an adult for a couple hours. That's all I'm asking. I don't think it's too much. No besmirching. Exactly, Beth. No besmirching. So that's the deal with Socialism Saturday, guys. Now, to help make this go a little bit easier, we do have Socialism Bingo for you. Let me pop that Socialism Bingo in the chat, and I will pop it in the chat over on Rumble as well. Thank you to the people who are watching over on Rumble. I do appreciate it. I've been seeing a little bit of an uptick in my Rumble audience lately, and so I do appreciate you guys joining me over on there. I also stream on Odyssey, Rockfin, Twitter, Gitter, Facebook, different places, whatever. Watch wherever is most convenient for you, but the best chat and the chat that I will be paying the most attention to is on YouTube. So if you do want to participate in the chat, I definitely recommend coming over to YouTube. I know many of you have feelings about YouTube, but it's just the way it goes. It's where most people are. So that's where the best chat is going to be. But maybe the Rumble chat will pick up. Sometimes it does on Socialism Saturday, so we'll have to see. Anyway, you've all got your Socialism Bingo card. Click Generate Card. You get a free square in the middle. And then we're going for lines or we're going for corners. And if you're really lucky, you get solidarity twice, because that is our little nod towards equity. Okay, it's just because I screwed up the bingo card and I still haven't fixed it. But there is solidarity twice on the bingo card, so make sure you take advantage of it. Every time they say a word, please check off your card and then shout out bingo when you get it. If you like, once we actually get a bingo and you don't win anything, we'll give you a nice round of applause, though. We're going for blackout bingo after that. Just a nice little game to keep us entertained. And as a reminder, please do make sure you are subscribed to my Substack, which is Carlyn, Karlyn, .substack.com. This is where I post all of my best content. This is my content hub moving forward. We've got free posts. There's some premium posts. There's a couple podcasts that are on there. All of my content runs through Substack, and I do have several different Substacks that you can subscribe to. But this is my main one, which is carlyn.substack.com. The link is in the description below, and you'll be able to catch up on my content, such as an article I posted last night, just really emphasizing for people who don't know the difference between equality and equity. This is kind of like a basic 101 level thing. I do have a series that I do on my Substack called Woke 101, which is for people who, like, if you're just starting to wake up to this stuff and you're new and all of the language is confusing and the vocabulary is confusing and you don't understand why they do these things that kind of seem crazy. I'm trying to create a series of articles that I'm calling Woke 101 that basically go back to, the most basic level of woke that we can get to about the woke left anyway, to say when they say X, here is what that means. When they say Y, here is why they're doing that. To help people understand why the woke left are doing what they're doing, because it's not enough just to think the left is crazy if we want to beat them. We actually have to understand why they are doing what they're doing. This is not theoretical. If you do not understand your enemy, you cannot beat your enemy. So as much as you might think they're crazy, as much as you might think that this is a stupid waste of time to watch them and learn about them, I would tell you that if you don't take the time to do it, you don't really care about winning, and don't be surprised when they kick your asses, as they are up and down the playing field right now. One of the reasons we started watching Socialism Saturday was because we discovered that if we go back and watch socialism videos from like 2, 3, 4 years ago, those are the talking points of the Democratic Party today. So these are people that are not in a far off bookstore in North Carolina. These people are actually influencing national politics. And it's just coming a couple of years after they have those crazy conversations in the bookstore. Okay. You need to understand what they think. You need to understand why they're doing what they're doing. And there are too many influencers out there who are lying to their audiences about what's going on. We know the truth because we listen to them. And I provide receipts to back up every single thing that I'm saying. And buy my book. It's called Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against the woke insanity in your life. Heidi says Carlyn is doing the Unwoke Lord's work. Pay attention. Well, I do appreciate that, Heidi. Thank you for that rousing endorsement. All right, guys, that is all I have for announcements and stuff before you. Oh, one more thing. Sorry, one more. If you do want to support the work I'm doing financially, because I'm completely 100% funded by you, the very best way to do that is by becoming a paying member of my Substack. Now, you can also become a paying member in Locals. You can become a paying member on my Patreon. You can become a member of this here YouTube channel, send in a super chat, whatever you guys want to do, whatever's clever. I want to give you lots of different ways to support the work I'm doing, so that whatever is easiest for you. But if I had to direct you to choose one of them, it would be signing up as a paying member of this Substack, because I do premium content on this Substack that is only available to paying members. Right now, it's $5 a month, $50 a year. However, at the end of the month of July, I am going to be increasing the price to become a paying supporter on my Substack, because I want to put myself more in line with the people who have the audience that I have, essentially. And I'm right now a little bit below them. And so that's fine. I want to make it affordable for everyone, but I will be raising the price of the Substack from $5 a month to $8 a month, or from $50 a year to $80 a year. And that's going to be coming at the end of July. However, if you sign up as a paying member before then, you get grandfathered in. So your price will never go up, which I think is pretty great, but you do need to head over to the Substack. And I do want to I got like 10 new paying supporters yesterday. So I want to thank the 10 new people who have signed up as supporters of my work. It really has helped me out. Every dime I make basically gets reinvested back into creating Unwoke content for you guys to teach about this, because I have no life outside of this. I'm a little bit obsessed. So I really do appreciate it. Beth, Queen Beth of the chat. Here's something towards someone in the chat who doesn't have a book. Carlin, you figure out who wins and how. Thank you, Beth. I will take advantage of that. I do appreciate it. Thank you so much for the donation. I love it when people do this. And guys, by the way, I've had so many people like email me and they're like, Carlin, I'm already a paying member of your Substack, but I want to give a gift of support. Like, and I want to give someone a gift subscription to it. Can I do that? Yes, you can. You can actually do it on the Substack. And if you don't have a specific person you want to give a gift to, let me know. And I will, I have essentially a list of like really, really good supporters in my community that maybe they can't afford it right now. It's just something they have a lot of subscriptions going on. And so if you have like a gift subscription that you want to donate, I can definitely match you up with someone who would really appreciate that and value that. And we've done that a couple times now. And it makes me so happy. And I do really appreciate it when you guys do that. So thank you so much again. I appreciate it. All right. So with that out of the way, let's get into our show for today. And guys, please do mount that like button for me. We do not smash the like button on this channel. We mount the like button on this channel like adults. You can mount it hard. You can mount it soft. You can spank that like button if you want. I don't really care. Whatever feels right to you is what you can do to the like button, all right? But I do see a very high discrepancy between the number of people watching right now and the number of people who have mounted that like button. So let's just get those numbers up a little bit. Let's get them up. But we are watching Let's Abolish Adult Supremacy. And we're going to go ahead and get started. Let me make this big so everyone can see it. Someone pray a rosary for us. We're going to be here for a while. Go grab a beer, and we will have a good time tonight. Welcome to Socialism Saturday.
Yeah.
Okay, y'all. We are up and running. So I just want to start by welcoming everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. My name's Liberty, and I'm a member of the Firestorm Collective.
Strawberry daiquiri.
We're excited to host this discussion about the abolition of adult supremacy with contributors from a new book, Trust Kids, Stories on Youth Autonomy and Confronting Adult Supremacy from AK Press. If you haven't picked it up yet, you really should. Everyone kept saying that it's a book that's going to make you cry. And I was like, it's not going to make me cry. And then I got like 10 pages into it and was choking up. So there you go. Firestorm, our collective, is a 14-year-old radical bookstore owned and operated by a queer feminist collective in Southern Appalachia. We operate on the land of the Cherokee people. We strive to feature books and host events that reflect our interests and the needs of marginalized communities in the South. We're also continuing to do events like this one online, both because we really like reaching people at a distance and across borders, but also because COVID, we know, is continuing to create barriers for many people in our community. over the course of this month, we'll be doing a couple more events to wrap up the year. Those include events on the role of violence and nonviolence in our movements, and mentorships for incarcerated writers. So if those sound like interesting topics to you, definitely consider signing up for those events. Follow us on social media, and I'll drop a link to our calendar in the chat. So please note that tonight we are using Zoom's Q&A tool. If you have any questions throughout the evening, I would encourage you to just go ahead and write those questions out. You can find the tool in Zoom kind of like located at the bottom of the screen. Or if you're not on Zoom, but you're like watching this as a stream, like on Facebook, you can simply use the comment section there. Okay, great. So we're going to get started. I'm going to do a few introductions. Tonight, we are joined by Trust Kids editor Carla Joy Bergman and Nolika Radway, Stacy Patton, Toby Rollo, and Zach Bergman. Carla is a joyarchist who dabbles with poetry, writing, and storytelling.
Toby is the professor.
Often,
The white man
opening
is the
realms of
professor.
autonomy, art, creativity, and challenging empire. Carla has spent the last 2 decades creating intergenerational multimedia projects with communities that are rooted in trust and with youth autonomy and undoing adult supremacy at the heart of all she does. Nolika Radway is the founder of Queer Media, a family production company specializing in audio and visual art through a Black queer.
This was not during the pandemic. This was a couple months ago. This was 6 months ago. So no, this was not doing the pandemic.
Lens. She's the producer and host of the progressive parenting podcast, Raising Rebels. I'll drop a link. She's also the former executive director of the Brooklyn Free School. Stacy Patton is a child abuse survivor and former foster youth turned an award-winning journalist, college professor, and child advocate. She's the author of That Mean Old Yesterday, Spare the Kids, Why Whooping Children Won't Save Black America, and the forthcoming Strung Up, The Lynching of Black Children in Jim Crow America. Toby Rollo is an associate professor of political science at Lakehead University. His research interests focus on democratic theory, the history of political thought, disability, and childhood. He is published on the intersections of childhood and race, colonialism, feminism, and contemporary democratic politics. Last but not least, Zach Bergman is an artist, writer, record label owner, and a composer. He holds an MA in electroacoustics and composition from the University of Birmingham. You can find Zach's music under the moniker Sour Gout and Collapse Structures. So welcome everyone. I'm going to go ahead and pass off to Carla, but I am just immensely pleased to be here with you tonight.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Liberty. Thanks, everyone. Just everyone who's showing up and being here. It's so humbling, and we're all so grateful that you're here. It's just thank you.
Oh, Nuclear,
thanks
that's
to everyone
very
at
nice of
Firestorm,
you.
The whole events and the process.
Nuclear showing his soft side.
Generative and supportive, and I really appreciate it. Zach and I are calling in from the land of the Musqueams, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, also known as
double
Vancouver,
land blessing,
Canada.
isn't that nice?
And I get a little nervous, so I do have notes, so bear with me. I'm going to try to keep this sort of intro under around 5 minutes, because everyone here is so incredible, and I want you all to have time to hear from these brilliant people. I just quickly want to give a shout out to AK Press for supporting me in this work all along the way, especially Zach Blue. Thank you so much. Just lots of love and gratitude to my family, Uliam, Zach, and Chris, and my dear friends, Lily, Chris Time, and Kitty, who have really supported me with this event in lots of unforeseen and beautiful ways. And I just want to thank everyone who contributed to the book, like in black and white inside the actual book, but also everyone beyond, like across generations, across all time. We're sitting with so many people, and I just want to acknowledge that and invite them here, and all of you. But most of all, thank you to Nolika, who's calling in from the middle of the night in Europe. Thanks for being here. Thank you, Stacy, so much for being here. And thank you, Toby, so much for being here. And of course, thank you, Zach, for being next to me and supporting me. Yeah, I before I get started on kind of framing the book, I want to talk about why this talk has 5 adults on the panel, because I've heard
I'll pop in
through
the bingo
grapevine
card again,
that
Chad.
this is a comment that gets posted on social media. I want to say I'm always learning. I did invite my team to sit here next to me. He also wrote for the book, in the book, and he said, "Are you kidding me? I am not going to be the tokenized youth on a panel with a bunch of adults talking about abolishing adult supremacy, because it is an adult problem and it is up to you guys to figure this out." If you want to do a thing on autonomy and youth, I'm there. So just wanted to give that framework because I think it's important.
The children are like, we're not going to do the emotional labor that you should damn well be doing yourself, adults. Get it together. No, but seriously though, and someone said this earlier in the chat, but if you're new and you haven't seen this type of thing before, the way that socialists think of families and like children, it's very, very similar to how like Scientologists think of children, which is that Scientologists kind of think that children are little adults. They're adults in the bodies of children. And socialists view it exactly the same way. Socialists believe that children being considered the private property of their parents, which is code for like parental rights, should be abolished, because children are able to make their own decisions and they don't need to be like raised by adults or have mentors or any of that sort of nonsense. So they do want to completely abolish parental rights because they think that children are but little adults that can make decisions on their own. So okay. Hang on. Sorry. Got a super chat from Savra. It's good to see you, Savra. It's been a while. Remember, imagine you need a reimagining population dumbed down on WAP and fast food. Well, I'm not going to say what that actually means. In fast food, the profane masses are acting out the deconstructionalist ideologies in real time. It was seeded centuries ago. Yes, it was, Savrits. Thank you for the support and the thoughtful super chat, as always.
Welcome to the talk about Trust Kids, abolishing adult supremacy. Trust Kids is a book about relationships and love, first and foremost. And it is,
if we love children,
some of the stories,
we will
but there
let
are
them
so many more.
Live their lives on their own at their whim.
And to me, trust flows best when the conditions are set up to allow for it. So adult supremacy is the thing that prevents trust from flowing in relationships between kids and adults. Trust is always a risk, but it's always worth it and foundational to the thriving community, including in our homes. Because to me, solidarity begins at home. Why I center solidarity and autonomy is because adults, all of us, cannot liberate young people. No group that has power over or is oppressing another group can liberate them. But we can be in solidarity with young people. We can help co-create spaces and places for them to thrive more and to experience more autonomy, and maybe work together for intergenerational thriving. The book aims to amplify stories and actions that reveal the liberatory potential of undoing these social borders that cut us off from each other and the world. Therefore, for youth autonomy and collective liberation to take hold, adults must also contend with their personal and social power while they actively work to undo adult supremacy. This social constructed and often violent social border between adults and kids is a massive barrier to youth and kids' autonomy. And
so the way the brain develops is just made up. It's just so the brain, guys, is socially constructed. The fact that our brain does not fully develop until we are in our early to mid 20s, and the logic, reason, function of the brain is the last part of the brain to develop because it is the newest part of the brain that exists. That is just all socially constructed nonsense. 8-year-olds are fully capable of making adult decisions, okay? Why are we oppressing the children by telling them that they can't do whatever they want in the world when, because the brain doesn't matter, it's just social construction that kids need guidance and mentorship and stuff like that. Philosophist, I can't help think of you talking about the emotionally stunted people the other day. Yeah, I mean, I firmly do believe, and this is just anecdotal, I don't have any evidence to back this up, but I've just seen it over and over again. I think that, like, people who get sucked into, like, the gender ideology, the queer studies stuff, like, a lot of them to me come across as very emotionally stunted at whatever age they get sucked into the ideology. Even if they desist or even if they detransition, they still, to me, come across as very emotionally stunted. I'm not sure exactly why that is. I'm not sure if it's that they just had really bad therapists or possibly no therapy at all. It could be because many of them are autistic. Bot, I see you saying that, but it is like, even with, like, detransitioners, I've definitely seen this with detransitioners where even if they understand that the ideology they got sucked into is bad, they still seem, to me, very emotionally stunted. And I think that that's a sad thing, and I think that that's something that if we were in a sane world, that we would actually be looking at in a nuanced way to say, like, how can we help these people live fully developed and, relatively normal lives? But remember, the goal of queer ideology is explicitly to destabilize anything that's normative, and so they don't want that. But thank you for the super chat, Philosophist. I do appreciate it. And we got another super chat from Wattweiler. I sense they'll quote queer futurity and childhood innocence beyond the injury of development by Hannah Dyer, blurring the line between kids and adults and open the door to intergenerational relationships. I mean, I bet that's a really good sporting guess. And all of this, by the way, guys, goes back to abolish the family. Remember, one of the prime goals that is stated in the Communist Manifesto 150 years ago is to abolish the biological family. Okay? So everything about this, like, liberating kids, adult supremacy bullshit, it all goes back to abolish the family. Thank you for the super chat, Rottweiler. Let's keep going.
And intergenerational thriving. Unbuilding these walls will take a fierce commitment from us all, because as long as there are seeds of hierarchy in any of our relationships, justice will not take root, and it definitely won't bloom. So I aim to do a couple things with this book. One is to disrupt the notion that school is the central part of children's lives, or that the oppression of children hinges only on schooling. Instead, I wanted to take a step back and come and start at home. It's our most private place because children cannot live alone. Power and privilege are at play there always, even in the most radical homes. This is an issue. This is happening. Sorry, I lost my place. Yeah, and the second thing I did was I actively invited in folks who aren't parents or don't work with children, because it was important to think about all the ways that adults interact with young people out in the world, including school, but also just anywhere, to talk about adult supremacy.
It's important to bring in adults that don't actually have any experience with children to talk about why children don't actually need adults. Listen, I don't have kids, so I'm guilty of this, but I'm also not out there saying, you know what we need to do? We need to liberate children from adults because children are just fine making decisions on their own. I'm also not pushing this bullshit. I'm in fact saying parents need to make the decisions, and that's just the way it goes. But whatever. Anyway, James Jones super chat. So she's saying an oppressor can't do anything but oppress, and any attempts to persuade them is useless. So why is she talking to adults? Because they're like doing a play on, like, the anti-racism stuff where, like, Remember the anti-racist a couple years ago was like, we're not going to help you do this, white people. You need to do the emotional labor of abolishing all your whiteness and and become good anti-racist. And if you're not actively anti-racist, then you're just racist. Like, they're trying to do a play on that where they're like, kids don't need to help you abolish adult supremacy. You need to do it on your own. You created this problem. You should solve this problem. So that's what they're trying to do. It's a way of trying to control people at the end of the day. It's really nothing more than that. Remember, these people don't actually care about any of the problems they claim to care about. They don't actually care about them. They're not trying to solve this problem. They're trying to use this to gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in their Marxist utopia. In the Communist Manifesto, they talk about how essentially like biological families, parental rights is just like a mode of like enforcing capitalism or whatever. It's called social reproduction theory, where they're saying that the biological family reproduces the worker in order to feed capitalism. What does that mean? It means biological families have kids. They're creating the worker to feed the capitalist system, and they wouldn't need to do that if we weren't feeding the capitalist system. So at the end of the day, you always have to remember that these people do not actually care about what they claim to care about. They're just using it as a tool to gain more power, and that's it. But I appreciate the super chat, James Jones. Thank you. And then Savras says, imagine reforming a society like Idiocracy in 1984. That's a thought that's going to stick with me for a minute, Savritz. I hadn't thought of it like that, but you're not wrong, and that's a little bit scary. A little bit scary, if I do say so myself.
And I also did it because we've all been kids. And perhaps it's a more generative place to start this conversation from. It's an invitation to us all. And I'm not collapsing us into sameness here. Not at all. This isn't a liberal call to all get along, but it's rather highlighting this alongside the uneven and just the unfair world. Because again, I'm going to say it again, confronting adult supremacy needs more adults doing the work. It kind of needs us all, actually. And this is my last little bit. Tuning into the horrors of adult supremacy and seeing it everywhere can sometimes be a lonely road. And I mean this, like, this is why I have a lot of grief around this work a bit. There's a lot of loss. There are a lot of adults can't hold it with you. They leave. Relationships go away. And so as while I'm just so blown away and so grateful for all the activists and organizers and everyone who's showing up and talking about this conversation and doing the work to undo adult supremacy, I have these mixed feelings going at play. I faced a lot of vitriol over the years when I'd bring this conversation up in any organizing space. So it's got a long history. So with that, I invite you all, everybody, even if you've been on this road or if you're new to it, to walk with us, to walk with the slowest a la Zapatistas, to walk with tenderness and fierce love. And then together, let's abolish adult supremacy. And that's my introduction and framework. I'm now going to, I have some prompts for each of the panelists. And first up, Nolika, hi.
Hello.
Thank you for being here. I'm so excited to share the space with you. I could say more, but I want you to say more. So please respond to the powerful bell hooks quote, which I used in my introduction. Children need to be raised in loving environments. Whenever domination is present, love is lacking. And perhaps can you talk about the role of vulnerability in undoing the social borders between kids and youth?
I want
and whatever else you want to talk about.
Yeah, I can talk about all of the things. I want to just I'm feeling as you were sharing, your intro and talking about all of the things, like it was making me really emotional. Like I feel myself like I wanted to read my piece before I could, just to refresh it. And every time I went to go read it, I was like, I couldn't. Like it was just, I don't know, tender still. And I think about love a lot when I'm thinking about this conversation in my relationship with my children in a very purposeful way. And I think often with love, there's this way
Oh,
of
so
like,
she
of
has
course, parents love
kids.
their children. You know what I mean? Like, just,
Oh,
we all love, of course, parents love their children.
fascinating.
And we don't often like define what exactly do we mean by that. And so many people have kind of rediscovering bell hooks in general, but all about love and specifically. And in that book, where she defines love as the willingness to expand for the emotional growth of
I'm glad to
someone
hear that,
else and
Stephen.
yourself.
Welcome back.
It was like a light bulb. When I read that, like a light bulb went off. And she goes on to talk about like how so many of us are unloved, and we're unloved as children. We were cared for, but we weren't loved. We weren't, our parents, the adults in our life, were not willing to expand themselves for our growth, our emotional growth. A lot of times, I think parents will
Oh, that's a really
stretch
nice thing to
themselves to send
say.
their kids
Thank
to
you.
school. Like, I'm first generation Jamaican, and there's a way
I do
that
my best.
part of the immigrant Caribbean story is, work hard, abandon home, like do whatever you have to do so that your child can get an education, which is care and a lot of other things, but it's not necessarily love. It's not necessarily focusing the emotional growth of a child. And so I think I had to really like check myself around how I am in community with my own children, and whether or not I am like, how am I expanding? And what I realized when I like took a hard look, thank you for inviting me to do that, Carla. When I decided to do that, I realized like I am the problem. You know what I mean? Like how I engage with them, how I see them, how I talk to them.
Look at the look on Stacy's face.
I'm often really ready.
Look at the look
I'm
on
always ready with a
Stacy's
fiery
face.
email.
It's
Like when
classic.
someone at school or in a play space, especially like raising Black queer children in this world, there's like always some, I don't know if we can curse here, I curse a lot. There's always some shit to contend with. You know what I'm saying? There's always something coming up, and I'm really always ready to like go in and fight these outside forces. And what this
Hang on, I gotta pause to take this super chat from Juju. Thank you, Juju B. They talk about love being most important, but part of truly caring is understanding tough love and when to use it. These people don't understand what love means. Truly, these people seem to believe that love means giving anyone what they want the minute that they want it, for like, I mean, even if it's just like a ridiculous kind of request, it's like it's a very childlike thing of love, right? It's kind of like when a kid has a hissy fit and they're like, you don't love me because you won't let me go to the mall or something like that. And it's like, you won't let me have an ice cream cone, so you don't love me, like, sort of thing. And it's like, that's not actually what love is. But you're right. Like, I mean, when I do coaching, one of the things that I tell people when they hire me as like a professional coach or whatever is my role is to serve you, but that's not the same thing as pleasing you. Because sometimes when you're helping people to like reach goals or fulfill their true potential, you have to do things that piss them off. You have to tell them things they don't want to hear. You have to, and sometimes it gets a little tricky when you're coaching someone, but in a parental relationship, it's like, you can't be friends with your kids. I'm sorry, maybe someday you can be when they're like adults, but if your goal is to be like BFFs with your kids and please them all the time, you're going to fuck up your kids really badly. Thank you for the super chat, Juju. I appreciate it.
This book, this collective, this invited, like asked me to do was to look at myself and recognize that like it's happening here in our home. It's happening in the way I talk to them. It's happening in what I prioritize. It's happening when I think about like every time you say something to a child around, money. And because I'm paying for things, I have all the agency. And I would say, wait a second, if my partner said that to me because he makes more funds, it would be a problem. You know, the way in which people are really okay with making fun of like children, you know, like, oh my gosh, like, you know, I'm gonna knock that kid upside his head, or I'm going to just always like, just, it's okay for kids to be the butt of every joke. It's okay to talk about like how annoying teenagers are. Like that's just like a common thing we say, like those are people, those are human beings. You know what I mean? And like if someone said that about me, you know, my partner, and like it would be a problem. But with kids, it's okay. It's completely acceptable, because why? They don't get to a say. And so we're constant, and it's so hard, because I think that part of what is tricky in this cycle, and it often came up when I was running the free school, and like we're talking about how we engage with children and safety and all these things, there's a way that because we were all children, it doesn't make us more empathetic to children. It actually does this thing where it's like certain experiences are just a rite of passage. So I had this pain in my childhood. I had to go to school. You know, yeah, it's just part of what it is to become an adult. And really what we're trying to do is just get everybody into adulthood. Like the work of parents, work of adults, all we're trying to do is like, how quickly can you become an adult? The more you buy into adulthood, the more you assimilate to adulthood, the more
Buy
acceptable you
into
are in our society,
adulthood.
the more acceptable you are in the world. And that is our job. And I had this thought the other day, I was like, we're the enemy. Like we're literally adults, really, literally what we're doing is trying to destroy childhood. You know, like it's like literally our work is to end childhood. We are our primary thing we're doing is trying to walk children out, like leave that behind and come over here with us. Even though it sucks over here, it's a trap. Do not do it.
No,
Like
it's to
it
prepare
sucks
children
over
for
here.
adulthood, because adulthood does suck and it is
And
hard and they need to be prepared.
I just realized I just don't want to do it. And part of what in doing Raising Rebels, the podcast that I do, what I wanted to talk about was how, as you know, progressive Black parents, we're often trying to fight the powers out there. And it was important that we recognize the ways we've internalized those same ideas about like what makes someone good, what makes someone worthy, what makes life worth, like all of those things that we've internalized that we, as part of how we're raising our children. I often think about, we focus so much on like the content, like I want to make sure I'm teaching my child about, you know, whose land we're sitting on, you know, like I want to make sure I'm teaching my child about like the transatlantic slave trade. I want to make sure I'm teaching my child about Malcolm, and all of that is like well and good. Like teach them all the things, sure. But more importantly, get out of the way. You know, like more importantly,
Just give them what they
recognize
want.
that like how you are teaching those things are more, like I wouldn't even say as, more oppressive, more in alignment with like white supremacy than what you're teaching. And
What?
so that's the stuff that I have constantly had to
White supremacy means capitalism, as a reminder.
rework and and
I want to really emphasize this, because we're talking about a Black woman teaching presumably her Black child about just like like history, like the transatlantic slave trade. Okay, I have no problem with that. Martin Luther King, fine, like whatever. Teach your kid whatever you want. And then she says the way we're teaching the children like is white supremacy. How is it that a Black woman teaching her Black child about presumably Black history, which is fine, nothing wrong with that, how could that possibly be white supremacy? This is what I mean when I say white supremacy, whiteness has nothing to do with your skin color. We have got to stop, and I mean really effing stop, pretending that the woke left are trying to oppress the white man, because they're not. And the problem is that this misperception of them going after the white man and white people are the poor, abused people of society, that is making the people in the so-called anti-woke space come across as extremely fucking racist. Extremely racist. Every single time people are complaining about how poor and abused white people are because a black progressive has said something they don't like, it makes you look actually legitimately racist, okay? In order to really combat this ideology, you have got to wrap your head around the fact that when they say whiteness, when they say white supremacy, they do not mean skin color. I don't care if she said Malcolm X or Martin Luther King. I don't care. It doesn't matter. It is not pertinent to the goal. She is allowed to teach her kid whatever the fuck she wants. That's what parental rights means. The point is that when a black progressive or socialist, I would argue, is teaching their black child about black history and then saying this is an example of white supremacy, what I need everyone to hear and really understand is that, nope, Mark, they're not doing that either. Nope, wrong. We're not going to talk about that right now, but that is wrong. That is a right-wing talking point. That is not a left-wing talking point. It is a right-wing talking point. It is not a left-wing talking point. The attack on Western culture is a right-wing talking point. It is not a left-wing talking point. All of this stuff. We have watched hundreds of hours of this stuff at this point. We know what the left is saying. They have never talked about traditional masculinity. Not once. It's not a left-wing talking point, it's a right-wing one. If we are not explicit about what these people think and what they care about and what they are actually attacking, then we are going to be fighting the wrong problem and we are going to be playing right into their hands. How do we teach the right anti-woke about other definitions? I'm not sure we can, but I'm hopeful we can find a way. I'm trying on my Substack. I'm gonna come up with like a list of like really simple definitions. I've already been working on the articles for it. So I'm doing my part, but I think the biggest thing is that like I don't have influence on the right. I'm not an influencer on the right. And sadly, the biggest influencers on the right are teaching the right absolute bullshit. They're teaching them right-wing talking points that aren't even real. So I think one of the best things we can do is A, not play into the bullshit. Stop repeating that the woke left hate white men because they don't. Stop repeating that they are attacking Western culture because they are not. They're not. That is quite literally a talking point that comes from the alt-right white identitarians because the white identitarians call white people Western kind. And so every time, excuse me, every single time you hear someone on the right talking about how this is an attack on Western culture and Western identity, that is quite literally a talking point that's coming from the alt-right. Stop repeating it. Every single time we hear that masculinity is what they really want to abolish, then that's provably not true. They don't talk about that ever. And I would argue the depopulation stuff is in that thing as well, because the left never talks about depopulation. In fact, one of the things that they have talked about is how they're afraid that the right is trying to depopulate. They're afraid that the right is engaging in eugenics. So we've got to be explicit. We have to provide receipts. I try to do the best I can on my Substack. And I think I do a fairly good job, but I'm one person. It would really help out if people would share these definitions, but just teach people what you know. Teach people that every time they're repeating this stuff, they're repeating right-wing talking points and they're getting it wrong. And it's important that we get it right. Anyway, let's keep going. Oh, no, Vince said something really important. The left talks about queerness. Some on the right hear masculinity. Might be a better way to say what's happening. I think that that's a really interesting idea, Vince. I'm not entirely convinced that that's the end all be all, but certainly I think there's some there to that, and I do appreciate it. And I appreciate the support via Substack, Zuzu. Thank you. All right, guys, let's keep going.
Like constant practice. Like I said to I was talking to my partner today, and I was like, you know what I think we really need to do often is to ask our children if they think we have a favorite. And I said, and he's, it was like, that's interesting. What do you think they'd say? And I was like, I don't even think it matters what they say. I think that it matters, but like, that's not why we're doing it. I think why we're doing it is like, we need to be willing to hear the truth. We need to be willing to hear and not be defensive around like, oh, you said it was so-and-so. Well, that's not true. Look at how much I love you both the same. More to say like,
I missed a super chat. I apologize. Hang on. Let me find it. Thank you, Rottweiler. I apologize. Narcissistic adults using kids as narcissistic supplies, turning them into narcissistic, dysfunctional adults that will continue destabilizing things. Well, that's absolutely correct. That's 100% correct. Yeah, I mean, narcissists are created through nature and nurture. So in order to develop narcissistic personality disorder, two things have to be true, and you can't have one, you have to have both. Number one, you have to have at least one parent who is a narcissist, because you're going to have the genetic predisposition to be a narcissist. Number two, you have to have certain things happen in your childhood that essentially take you completely out of control and don't fulfill your basic needs. And that's like nurture. So it has to be nature and nurture. And if you don't have both, you're not going to be a narcissist. But if you have a parent who's a narcissist, like many of these people are, you could very well become a narcissist yourself, and it would just self-perpetuate. Great point, Rottweiler. I'm sorry I missed the super chat. Dragonwater says the idea of the attack on masculinity comes from the idea of toxic masculinity and what's happening in movie with traditionally male characters, but it's like Carlin's saying they're after that's exactly right. So the attack on the toxic masculinity stuff is nothing more than an attack on the gender binary. This is important. It is not about masculinity. They don't give a flying F about masculinity. They are using masculinity or toxic masculinity to attack the gender binary, because their goal is not to abolish men. It is not to abolish women. It is not to abolish toxic masculinity. Their goal, and they have stated this over again, is to abolish the gender binary. Now, they also attack women. They attack women in women's sports, etc., etc., etc. A lot of they want to abolish women. They want to abolish lesbians. They want to do this, that, and the other thing. Well, which is it? Because either they want to abolish men or they want to abolish women. You have to choose one. But the fact of the matter is they attack both men and women. They attack both genders. They attack the norms around both genders. Why do they do that? Because they don't care about abolishing men or toxic masculinity. They don't care about abolishing women or women in women's sports or any of these other things. They care about abolishing the gender binary. All of this are just different tactics and different tools in their toolbox to abolish the gender binary. That's what it is. That is their target. And if they have to use toxic masculinity to get at their target, they'll do it. If they have to use trans women in women's sports to get at their target, they will do it. But don't be fooled. They don't care about either gender. They want them both gone. They want to create a world of non-binary people, a world of theys. That is quite literally what queer theory is all about. And I know it's confusing because we have to peel back several layers of the onion to get there, but that is what they're really after. And Pam's coming in with the typical right-wing talking point. Pam, you guys harp on Bill Gates all the time. Bill Gates is one fucking person. I have yet to hear. I have listened to hundreds of the most hardcore leftist activists in the country over the past 10 months. I do this almost every day of the week. I do not watch clips that circulate on Twitter. I don't watch like these little things taken out of context. I listen to the full presentation of hundreds of far left activists, and not a single solitary one of them has been talking about depopulation. And in fact, the opposite is true, because what they do talk about, and what I've seen several presentations on, is how afraid they are of the right using eugenics to depopulate society. So you're talking about one single person who has said a couple things that you take out of context to make it seem like the end of the world. Why is it, if this is really a left-wing globalist conspiracy, then how the fuck is it that I can spend pretty much all my time listening to the most hardcore far-left activists in the country, and not a single one of them has ever talked about it? And in fact, they've talked about the opposite of that, which is that they're afraid of the right doing it. How is that actually possible? I'll wait for an answer on that. Anyway, let's keep going.
Like, oh no, this is information about where I'm fucking up. Like, this is information for me around where the inequalities are existing within our home, and so that I can do something about it. We have to, as parents, be willing to invite back feedback, like real feedback from our children, and to recognize that that is really hard. Like, children are so loyal to their parents. And I'm talking about like adults. When I talk to adults on a podcast and they're telling their stories of childhood, there's always this desire to kind of like make it okay that my parents beat me, make it okay that they made, like, I felt like lost or alone, make it okay that I had some kind of, like, I don't want my parents to feel like I don't think they love me. And like, as adults, you know, this is so for children, this is also the case. So this, I think a lot of times, like, we think we are getting that feedback from the children in our lives, and we really aren't. So I would, you know, I could go on and on, and please tell me if I'm rambling, but I think the role that vulnerability, you know, plays in all of this is that you've got to be, oh my gosh, you've got to be like really brave, really, really, really brave to invite this level of introspection into your life. Like, you have to be really brave to be the villain. Do you know what I mean? You have to be really brave to, and you know, it's really hard to be the victim, you know, to be the targeted group. It's really, really hard. And when you are the targeted group, to then turn around, like, I'm speaking to specifically, you know, Black, brown, queer parents, to then turn around and be willing to say, and here I am doing the same shit to the people I love the most, the people I'm supposed to like be here to support, to like to ride for, to like the most, that I am doing this. I think that's like really, it requires a lot of bravery, because it is lonely, because it is heartbreaking. Like I said, I couldn't like, it's hard for me to make, like, even listening back to old episodes of my podcast, like, it's cringy to me. I'm like, I can't believe I said that about my child. You know, like, it is really hard.
Hang on, got a question from Zuzu that I think is actually really great. You're asking great questions tonight, Zuzu. Are the right/anti-woke expressing their interpretation of a kind of Rorschach test? So it's kind of like the ink blot test, where they're seeing what they want to see based on how they perceive the world. I think that this is actually a really astute observation. And yes, I think that that's actually the case. It's like they're like, and this is true of anyone, guys. Like, this is not just a knock on the right. We all do this. Literally every single one of us do this. Because of how the brain is hardwired to work, we make decisions emotionally and then we justify them rationally. So, and that's that, you'll just have to trust me on that. I don't want to go into the psychology of it, but it has to do with just the like, where, what places in our brain that actually makes decisions, what's more powerful in our brain, what's less powerful in our brain. We make decisions emotionally, because the emotional part of the brain is just more powerful than the rational decision, than the logic and reason part of our brain. But then we use the logic, reason part of our brain to justify them. That is true of every single person in the world. That is true of every one of you in the chat, okay? If we make decisions emotionally and then we justify them rationally, what that means is that how we see the world is always going to inherently be filtered through our emotions about the situation. So, for example, I was just having this conversation on my bitchcraft call earlier today with my community, and we were talking about, like, if you want to hate someone, if someone just rubs you the wrong way for whatever reason, you don't like them, if you want to hate someone, it is incredibly easy to find reasons to hate that person. You might not like their haircut. You might think they're ugly. You might think their voice is awful. You might say, oh, they have the stupidest ideas in the world. And not only would it be easy for you to find a reason to hate that person, it would also be easy for you to overlook every single thing about that person that might contradict your reason for hating them. So I'll give you an example. And this example happened to me just this last week, where you guys know I was working on this like expose over like the queer theology stuff this week. If you haven't seen the queer theology stuff, head over to my Substack. The link is below, and check it out because it's insane. Anyway, so I was putting all this stuff on Twitter about this crazy queer theology lecture that really promoted people. Like, it was in a church. There was a big trans flag in the church alongside with Jesus. And the woman who is a professor at the Toronto School of Theology was all like, yeah, here are all the sex clubs that you can go to if you want to get kinky with other Christians. And there was a lot of other crazy stuff too. So I'm putting this stuff out on Twitter saying, here is what queer theology means. Here's a theology professor at the Toronto School of Theology talking about Christians having BDSM gangbangs with God and going to Christian sex clubs and all that stuff. And that's all literally what she said. I'm not making any of that up. Well, I have a group of people who hate me on Twitter. And do you know what those people said? They were like, Carlin's pushing this smut on Twitter. And I was like, like, literally, I'm exposing it and saying, is everyone okay with talking about BDSM gangbangs with God? And like, I think this is a little crazy. And people who hate me only saw, they were like, Carlin is pushing smut on Twitter. And so that's an example of how this works, right? It's like, it's like if we don't like someone, it is very easy to like take things out of context to reinforce our hatred of that person and to ignore evidence that's like right in front of us that might contradict the evidence that we found to hate that person. And so that was a personal example with me, but I think that sort of thing happens all the time with people like this, where the right has a very specific way that they see the world, and the left does too, but all of the information they're taking in about the woke space is designed to reinforce their worldview. For example, this notion that everything the left does is demonic. This is a demonic attack on our society. We are surrounded by groomers and pedophiles at all times, and it is all demonic, and it is Satan at work. The only people who say that are Christians. People who are not conservative Christians don't go around saying it's demonic and it's satanic and we are surrounded by these demons and we are in a spiritual warfare. And so every single thing that they see in the world is going to be about reinforcing the idea that we are in a grand spiritual battle with God, because they have a persecution complex, because they are desperately waiting for the apocalypse to occur. And so they have to look like we are in the end times. It is the apocalypse. I'm going to get in such trouble. Beth is already like screaming in the chat right now. I know. But like that's how this works. If you are a conservative Christian, not all of them, but some of them, and you want to believe that we're in the end times and you want to believe that we are in a great spiritual battle for the soul of humanity, then you're going to go, everything that I disagree with is demonic and satanic and everyone is awful except me, you know? So that's kind of how it works. But I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to answer the question, Zuzu. Thank you. White Wizard Alex said, Carlin, over the past decade or so, we've seen the right get spun into a frenzy to the point where right-wing influencers have become socialist magicians' assistants. Yes, we have. Number two, before the right-wing influencers, do you think that role was filled by progressive identitarians? I mean, progressive identitarians still exist. I think they both have their role to play with spinning up their prospective audiences. I hope that I'm just trying to stay above the fray. I think both sides are crazy. But the reason we focus on the left more is that while the right is just as crazy as the left is actually more dangerous than the right because they control more. But I think they both still exist. White Wizard Alex, thank you for that. Let me just scroll through, make sure I didn't miss any chats or anything. All right, guys, let's keep going.
And also, it's adults will ask you to become like co-conspirators with them in the oppression of your children every single day. Schools are asking you to do that every single day. Grandparents are asking you to do that. Partners are asking you to do that. Like, constantly cover for me while I am like oppressing this human being. Like, don't say anything. Don't don't check me. Don't contradict me. You like, we have, you talk like we have to have this kind of shared perspective, and in order to oppress this very small young person, it's absurd when you think about it. It's like so upsetting. And I want to say, like, the last thing is like, we're trying to do something that we really don't know how to do, right? There's no rule book, there's no precedent, there's no like, what do you mean like youth oppression? What do you mean like adult supremacy? That's just the way it is. No, that's not the way it is. That's not the way it is. That's not the way it has to be. That's not the way it should be. That's not the most loving way to be.
Can we define
And yeah,
adult
you're right. You
supremacy,
still have to
please?
care for
Can we
them.
get a definition?
You're right. You're still responsible for feeding them. You're still responsible for loving them. You're still responsible for housing. All of the things. Because guess what? You have all of the power. You have all of the privilege. You do. The world is oriented towards you. I want to say one last. I want to say a lot of things on this call, but one last thing before I stop. We move on. Something that really pisses me off, and like the places where you can see adult supremacy at its like finest work is in TV.
Hang on. Kathy, this is not true. I'm sorry. The people that you've been listening to have lied to you and have spun you up. This is not true. Please stop fear-mongering in my chat. This is not true. Well, exactly, Philosophus. I'm looking for a definition of adult supremacy, and it's really capitalism. You're actually probably right about that. Well done.
And movies and media. And I am always like, I have been fortunate.
Maybe the college professor will give us a definition.
To get to see children in spaces without adults, like physically present. Adultness is always in the room, just like whiteness is always in the room and heteronormative is always in the room. It's always in the room. But I've been fortunate to see children function out with when
whiteness
adults
is
are like
always
not
in the room,
on them.
even when there are no
and
white
it's
people.
Always amazing. Consistently, no one's fighting, no one's trying to no one's trying to hurt anybody. Like, that's not what it is. And anytime you see it portrayed in the media, it's always like, oh my gosh.
Hang on, Mark's asking a question. He's got a typo in it, but I know what you're saying, Mark. Mark says, would you equate adult supremacy with children belonging to the state? Probably, because I suspect that that adult supremacy. Oh, I got you. I guess I see your chat, Trendle, and I'll show that in a sec. So I suspect that what they're doing is they're using this as a way to get at abolish the family, which is essentially parents don't have rights over their kids because that's considered a tool of capitalism, and so they want to get rid of parental rights entirely so that all children are raised by the community and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I do think that this is like a backdoor way of getting at that goal. Hopefully we find out, though. Trendlin says, a worldview, adult supremacy is a worldview that children are inferior and adults are superior, and that children must comply to adult expectations and the environment. Oh, so it's kind of like that queer imagination thing that we were watching yesterday, where it's like, you're trying to put adult parameters on children. Oh, here's what it is. It's about teaching kids to assimilate to normative society. That's what it is. I got it now. Okay. Adult supremacy is about adults forcing their children into this box to assimilate adequately to heteronormative society. And one of the goals of queer theory is to destabilize heteronormative society. And therefore, we need to destabilize adult supremacy, because adult supremacy is the thing pushing these kids into the heteronormative funnel to get them to accept these socially constructed norms as truth. I think I got it. I think we're there. Let me see. Yes, it is essentially Children of the Corn. This presentation is like the precursor to Children of the Corn. By the way, did anyone see the remake of Children of the Corn? Because like Children of the Corn, honestly, like Children of the Corn, the first one and the second one are like movies of my childhood. Like they're awful movies. Let's just be honest. They're like really bad movies. They're awful. But I noticed it was a couple months ago maybe that there was like a Children of the Corn remake, and I was like, because they always screw up the remakes. But I gotta say, I didn't think it was that bad. It really wasn't that bad. Like, they definitely changed stuff, but it was like, if you just take it on its own, I thought it was like a good, solid movie. And I might even say that in some respects, it's kind of like it's like Last House on the Left, which Last House on the Left is like one of the most classic horror movies. If you've never seen it, like it's crazy. But the original version of Last House on the Left also, it has some campy things about it that I don't really like. It has like crazy clown car music and stuff like that is just like weird within the, because it's a brutal fucking movie. Last House on the Left is, I know we're way off topic now, but it's my show. I'll do what I want. Last House on the Left is like a brutal movie. And they had this like campy clown car music in the original, but in the remake of Last House on the Left, they allowed it to be like a much more brutal movie. And I actually thought that the remake of Last House on the Left was better than the original Last House on the Left. But Children of the Corn had a really decent remake. I wasn't mad at it. Rottweiler, thank you for the super chat again. Adult supremacy is their code speak for critical consciousness of Paulo Freire, essentially driving a wedge between kids and adults, kids becoming the perpetual revolutionaries versus adults representing the status quo. That is a really great definition, Rottweiler. I need to put on my big girl pants and read more read Paulo Freire. And I know that. I just really don't like reading this stuff because A, it's James Lindsay's job, it's not mine, and B, like I don't want to. But I need to. But you're right. What a great definition. Thank you for that.
If you take the adults out of the picture, the children are going to just go like crazy. They're going to hurt each other, they're going to hurt themselves. It's like, what would they do? They would be fine. If we created spaces that were safe for them, they would be fine. And I'm really like fired up about this. So yeah, like I said, I will say more, but yeah.
Thank you for the fire, Nolika. That was beautiful. I just wanted to say, every time I've read the book a lot, editing it, and every time I read your essay, I'd have to go literally cry for like 10 minutes. It's so vulnerable and beautiful. And thank you for everything you do. I do podcasts and I'm used to doing a big back and forth, but we have like this container with this event. So I'm going to move on to Zach. First of all, thanks for being here. Can you talk a bit about your experience growing up around adults who are aiming to center kids
Zach
and their
is
autonomy,
like
not just
so
at home, but like
miserable.
in a larger community?
He's like, why am I doing this shit?
Different intergenerational collectives, radical and not radical. And just maybe speak to a bit about how that, what Nolika just said, that the adult supremacy is always in the room.
Stop. We do not bring this type of shit posting into this chat. We're here to learn. We're not here to shit post. If you're here to learn, you're more than welcome to stay, but please do not shit post in the chat.
And maybe talk a bit about aging into adulthood. Thank you. Oh, I was going to mute us.
Yeah, first, thanks, Carla, and thanks everyone for having me here today. For those who don't know, I'm also 50% here to support Carla. I've even been pulled all the way across the world to Prague to do this before. So,
So they're
it's what I like to do.
codependent. Okay, we got it, Zach. You're codependent.
So I don't want to take up too much space.
It's all good, Red Wolf.
But I appreciate that I
good.
got to experience this kind of, at least various attempts at creating youth autonomy throughout my life. So I'd love to like speak on a little bit of that and share a bit of that. Growing up in a home where youth autonomy and confronting adult supremacy was centered was quite interesting, because it was constantly a learning experience for like all of us, from what I know and from what I saw. Like early on, I went to a school, but I think what was so important was that all of the movements into trying to center autonomy were always open. They were always conversational with Carla and Chris, my dad, where the process of them figuring out how to confront this was very transparent to me from a young age. So where they would maybe mess up by just whatever.
Wait.
Being young parents.
Hang on. So you're telling me that Zach is like the child of Carla and Chris, and Zach has been involved in these discussions about Carla and Chris trying to undo adult supremacy from the time he was young. And so now Zach has now matured into adulthood. And Carla, because she is definitely not an adult supremacist, has dragged Zach quite literally all over the world to like provide her with emotional support when she has to do a Zoom meeting, because a person doing a Zoom meeting is a deeply traumatic experience, as we know. And in order to do that, we have to have our child fly across the world to go to Prague, or in this case, to sit next to her on the couch to provide her with the emotional support of doing the Zoom meeting. And that's not considered to be adult supremacy. I mean, my parents made many, many, many mistakes, as many parents do. I'm not trying to shit on my parents, but like the mistakes were made. Many parents make mistakes. But I'll tell you this, my parents didn't expect me to fly around the world to provide them with moral support for doing a Zoom meeting.
I knew that it wasn't normal, or that we're working to making it better. So it made me feel quite safe in my own skin and to make my own decisions. So when I moved into alternative education and then eventually unschooling, pulling out of even an alternative school when I was around 13, I think it was really important that I had the autonomy to
emotional incest, Mark. Exactly. What a great term.
Still have friends who went to high school.
Yes.
And still kind of exist on my own terms without having to feel too isolated. And a big part of this was the involvement I ended up having in various radical spaces, be they theater groups for whatever, or the Purple Thistle is the big one. And I think it was interesting being on a collective where the generations were quite wide, because the broad definition of youth by the Canadian government at the time was about 15 to around 30. So I'm 15 and I'm on this collective, and I'm supposed to run a space, and I'm given keys, and I'm part of this kind of community. But as much as kind of youth autonomy was centered in the space, like Nolika said, adult supremacy is always in the room. It's always there. And in various forms, I always was confronted with little moments of a power imbalance with some of the older youth on the collective.
Older kids can be adult supremacists too.
But yeah,
you don't even have to be an adult to be an adult supremacist.
Though, that ended up happening was having a younger brother who is 10 years younger than me. as I was coming into adulthood, allowed me to really see directly where I ended up taking on elements of adult supremacy, regardless of how I was raised, regardless of the environments I was in. Just little moments, even where my little brother will say something, and my initial thought, the first brainworm is, oh, you'll figure that out when you're older. Just that alone is something I'm always having to check. And it is hard. It's really incredibly hard to check that stuff because the ego is involved. The feeling that you went through that, you regret that, you don't like yourself in the past, you're constantly growing and changing. So why should I listen to what someone who is seemingly in a position I was in before thinks? So yeah, it's a difficult thing to confront. And I also noticed that I had to confront it a few times through the Purple Thistle as I got older, because I started taking on kind of an educator role, teaching darkroom, mostly photography and the like. Yeah, it's hard to really pinpoint anything specific where I felt either autonomy or my own adult supremacy. It was kind of a constant flow. It was constantly in flux and constantly having to like look at myself, but also look at those around me. It's really hard to reflect on because it's my whole life. There was not really a moment where I had to make a decision, but that's also where I fall into patterns. So it's kind of it's a difficult thing to answer, really. But yeah, I'm thankful that I've had the space since a young age to be aware of adult supremacy, to be aware of the need for youth autonomy, be aware of my own autonomy, and be aware of my own taking on adult supremacy, because adult supremacy is always in the room. Yeah, I think that's everything.
Thanks, Zach. Stacy, hello, thanks for being here. Your essay, I mean, it just has so many layers, and it's I think it's just really it's deeply important to bring forward and bring it, I don't want to say center it, but really bring it up to the front here. And I'm just, your title says so much. It's for folks who haven't read it, who are on here, Children of Children, Why the Adultification Thesis is a Misguided Trap for Black Children and Families. Can you introduce these
Why
ideas
is it just for
and
Black
praxis
children?
to us here?
So I first started thinking about this when I was a doctoral student at Rutgers University
Oh,
doing my
God.
dissertation research, which then was called Why Black Children Can't Grow Up, the Construction of Racial Childhood in Jim Crow. And I was basically looking at how in the aftermath of slavery and Reconstruction, which and the Jim Crow period, which overlapped with the progressive era, when you have this cultural ethos around improving the lives of children through medical care, education, the establishment of a separate juvenile justice system, et cetera, and how all of these different professions around children move through the race, the language of race and racism. And then I was specifically looking at how the developmental milestones of childhood, embryonic development, birth, adolescence, puberty, got seized by white supremacists and used to justify discrimination, to justify lynching,
Really?
to
Oh.
justify discriminatory policies.
Wait,
And all of that then seeped into Black parents.
how is she defining lynching? Because, okay, lynching is a thing that has happened in the past, and it's wrong and awful, and there are laws against that, and it should be banned, and it should be outlawed, and it should be a crime, and like all this stuff. I'm not doing anything in support of lynching is bad, okay? But this webinar was 6 months ago. This person seems to be of a certain age that I'm pretty sure there were anti-lynching laws. And so I have a hard time believing that when she says lynching, she means lynching in the way that we would think of lynching. Like, has there, like, when was there a spree of like lynchings? I'm not trying to make light of lynching. Lynching is awful, but I'm just saying, if there was an actual like spree of lynchings during this woman's lifetime, when was it and where was it? And what happened?
Parenting, a new generation of Black parenting that felt it needed to use harsh parenting to ensure the survival of their children. And this too was a continuation from centuries of slavery. So that's how I started thinking about that.
I strongly
And,
suspect she does mean
and so for much
metaphorical.
of my
So it'd be
activist
nice
life,
for her
I
to
had
note that.
explained that the harsh punishment experienced by Black children within their families has been in response to living in a racist, country that
Aha.
continues to deny protection.
So adult supremacy is systemic racism. Everyone on board? Adult supremacy is another instance of systemic racism. It doesn't happen to white people. It definitely doesn't happen to Asians. Asians who have the most hard-ass parents in the history of hard-ass parents, definitely not adult supremacists, because adult supremacy only happens to Black people because it is part of systemic racism. Apparently.
Of the sacred space of childhood. I had been arguing that as a researcher, as a journalist, as a child advocate, as an anti-spanking activist. And I consistently made this argument in print media and broadcast outlets when there were huge controversies over corporal punishment, when there were police shootings of young Black people. I did it in keynote speeches, community gatherings, in workshops with social workers and parents and so on and so forth. And I went hard saying that the acceleration of Black children into perceived maturity has long been a hallmark of anti-Blackness in America.
Well,
But
that's
then I met
interesting,
Toby
Sin.
Rollo, and we started
That's
talking about all
interesting.
of this, and I realized that my dissertation was wrong.
Listen, I'm gonna be honest. I don't have any issue with this person being like an anti-corporal punishment activist, advocate, whatever. I don't have any problem with that. I'm pretty like, I mean, I have a hard time believing that corporal punishment is necessary to raise kids. And I don't think that parents should be in the business of hitting their kids and physically abusing kids. And I think there is an epic ton of physical abuse in the name of spanking to to make kids good little Christians that happen in like very, very conservative Christian households, and not even just spanking, but with like paddles and like rods and shit. I don't like that. If you want to spank as an adult, fine, you're an adult, go to it, more power to you. I hope you have a grand old time. But like when it comes to like doing physical punishment on kids, I personally have a problem with it. So that's not something I'm going to make fun of her about, if I'm honest about it.
That what I had been arguing as a journalist, as an activist, was wrong. Not totally wrong, but it was wrong. I needed to reshape a lot of how I was thinking in terms of conceptions of childhood and conceptions of innocence, and just the long history of anti-child violence. I have not been alone in perpetuating this misguided thinking about the age compression of Black children and all of its insidious consequences. There's a lot of activists, political commentators, academics who've been producing reports like Girlhood Interrupted, for example. I think that they're out of Duke. I think that's Duke. Hope I got that right. And other policymakers who have advanced this adultification bias thesis through qualitative and quantitative studies on the experiences of Black children, and also surveying people's, racial attitudes about children. And so there seems to be this collective agreement that there's a deliberate unwillingness to see Black youth as children. One popular explanation for the disproportionate violence, with police violence against children, is because of adultification bias, that Black boys and girls are not seen as children. They're seen as
That's
as
true.
adults.
I agree with that.
And are denied.
I'm going to be honest. I actually do. I agree with that. And I think that that's wrong. I don't think that kids should be tried as adults. Because again, the logic, reason, function of their brain has not fully developed. I don't care how heinous the crime was they committed. The logic, reason, function of their brain hasn't fully developed. And so you cannot ignore that when it's inconvenient, right? Because you want to punish someone. And I do think that that probably does disproportionately impact young Black kids. And I think that that's wrong. So I don't actually disagree with what she's saying here. And I think that that's important to say.
The privileges and protections guaranteed to white children. Some people will point to the language that gets used to describe young people. So like Trayvon Martin, for example, in the closing arguments of George Zimmerman's case, George Zimmerman's attorney repeatedly referred to Trayvon Martin as a man, whereas the prosecutor in that case kept trying to return him to childhood by calling him a boy, and reminding the folks that this was a scared boy in his own neighborhood with Skittles and an iced tea. And then Zimmerman's attorney drew from this old trove of racist ideas about Black children's physiognomy. He even bought out cardboard cutouts to show the size differential between Zimmerman and Trayvon. So that case was not just about whether George Zimmerman was guilty or innocent, but whether Trayvon Martin and millions of other Black children actually qualify as children. And the outcome of that case scared Black parents and even white parents who have biracial kids and have adopted Black children. And so we really started seeing that conversation about the adultification of Black children amping up after that case and continuing through the Black Lives Matter movement. So there's this language about calling children women, men. There's comments on their size. The argument is that Black children are not seen as innocent. They're not afforded the ability to make mistakes or given the benefit of the doubt. And that adultification bias might be driving the severity of harsh punitive responses against Black children by teachers, judges, mental health providers, emergency room staff, law enforcement, and so on. So they're arguing that there's a propensity to respond to young Black people as if they're fully developed adults. And not allowing them to make mistakes. And so that popular conception of what it means to be a child and who gets to be a child, people argue are structured against Black children. That Black children are pathologized as angry, disrespectful, sassy, deviant, threatening, criminal, sexually precocious, and they carry adult-like culpability. And as such, Black children are denied empathy, compassion, nurturance, and opportunities to learn from their mistakes, like their white peers. My essay also goes into talking about how adultification bias asserts that childhood is a privileged and protected category, which is denied to Black youth because of racism, that only white youth are allowed to be children. And so all of this is supposed to explain the denial of innocence and protection and the violence that we keep seeing perpetuated against Black youth. But in my conversations with Toby, and we've been talking about this incessantly and obsessively for years, he helped me understand how the adultification thesis gets things backward, because we all have been sort of deluged, inundated by these popular representations of childhood as some kind of, protected category, that childhood innocence is like this real thing, rather than us stopping and saying, wait a minute, let's look at the actual histories and experiences of children. Let's go back, let's look at the art, Let's look and see what the archives were. Let's see where all those dead kids are buried in the walls of churches and buildings. Let's look at mass infanticide. Let's look at what preachers, have said about children and childhood in their sermons. Let's look at the dark and ugly experience and brutal experiences of children throughout the history of the West. It's a dark and brutal story of slavery, of mistreatment, sexualization, murder. And so what happens is we have in our conception this celebration of childhood innocence that we see in art and in culture that obscures, this very dark, ugly history, and how unsafe being a child has always been, for kids. And so in those conversations, I began to learn how to see how problematic. I was resistant at first. Toby will tell you I pushed back a lot. I'm like, what do you mean? This is, Black children aren't being treated the way that they're being treated because they're being denied innocence, or people are not recognizing them as children. So I put up a lot of resistance, but as I started listening and then going into the archives, he really helped me see how problematic a lot of the studies were, looking at the methodological flaws, and how they reinforce this idea that there's some general societal protection of children, which ultimately perpetuates a gross misunderstanding of white supremacy as some kind of child-friendly thing for some children. And he helped me see that.
So I'm going to be honest, and this might be controversial, but Stacy is actually talking about, dare I say, real problems. Now, Stacy's doing it in a very leftist way, where white supremacy, white supremacy, white supremacy, but there is an actual case to be made that Black children are treated disproportionately harshly by the criminal justice system when compared to like how white children doing the same thing are treated by the criminal justice system. So I give Stacy a little bit of a pass because at least Stacy is talking about real problems. And, I'm not like, I'm just because I'm against critical race theory and all this leftist garbage doesn't mean I think that we should ignore that the criminal justice system is completely effing corrupt and is in drastic need of reform, or dare I say, defunding. And I just want to put that out there. So I'm not going to rag on anything that Stacy's saying, because of all the people we've heard from so far, I think that Stacy is actually focused on what I would consider to be a real and legitimate problem. And if what Stacy was talking about is all that the left focused on, you would not hear a peep out of me at all, because I think there's a lot of there to what she's saying.
White supremacy requires the destruction of all children, regardless of race.
That was a very
or
socialist thing to
ethnicity.
say, Stacy.
It requires the destruction of kids psychologically, physically.
She means capitalism when she said white supremacy there.
Emotionally, so that they become susceptible to all kinds of toxic ideologies.
See, I
that
spoke
will
too
prime
soon.
them to perpetuate all kinds of ideologies: racism, sexism, misogyny, homophobia, all of the
capitalism. I spoke too soon, but that doesn't take away the fact that Stacy is actually talking about real problems. All right. Let me see. Rottweiler. I was right there, going for Hannah Dryer's queer futurity talking point, in which childhood innocence is another dimension of privilege. You were right, Rottweiler. Congratulations. Gold star. Rottweiler gets a king of the chat. Well done. Guys, when you get named a king of the chat, you can break the rules of the chat if you want, and I still won't ban you. It's like an honorarium more than anything for being a good contributor.
Those things that we're always talking about. Everybody's always talking about intersectionality, but they always skip over the foundational moment, which is childhood, where all this stuff begins to be perpetuated. And so,
hang on.
I had.
If you don't listen to them because you have convinced yourself that they are mentally ill, and you'll lose brain cells if you listen to them, then you are going to lose, and it will be your own fault. I will do the work of listening to them for you, but I'm not going to be told, you're going to lose brain cells if you listen to this for too long, because that fundamentally misses the point, and it sets everyone up to lose. And I'm sure you have the very best of intentions, but we don't do that here. I'm sorry. The whole point of these streams is to sit down and listen to them, because if you do not listen to your enemy and you are just perpetuating the same bullshit talking points from your influencers over and over and over and over and over again, then you do not understand your enemy. And if you do not understand your enemy, then you can never beat your enemy. So don't bring that in here. Don't.
Had to go back to Europe. I never thought that I would be writing about African-American childhood. So my next book is on the lynching of Black children. And I didn't think that the story would begin in Europe. I thought, okay, I'm going to the Jim Crow South and I'm looking for the first Black child that was ever publicly hanged. And I'm going to talk about all of these things that happened to Black children. But no, I actually had to go back to Europe to discover that the first children who were lynched in history were white. My youngest victim is a 6-year-old.
Really?
I found one mass lynching
Really?
of a public hanging of 10 white
Isn't
children.
that interesting?
So white people had been doing this to their own children centuries before.
I had no idea.
They did it to
That's
other people's
fascinating,
kids.
actually.
So what Black children experience, this violence that we still see manifested today.
Did anyone else
is
know
part
that?
of
I
a
didn't know that.
long heritage of anti-child violence.
Huh.
That, you know, was one of those patterns that was brought over from Europe. And so I started reading about the history of white children's traumatic experiences in European cultures and how that abuse set the behavioral patterns of their descendants. So they carried that trauma over with them in their bodies and in their practices, and how so those patterns of their descendants who would then displace and project their unhealed trauma, rage, and barbarism onto people of color around the globe through colonization, enslavement, apartheid, indoctrination into a bastardized version of.
See, this lady is really frustrating to me because I'm like, well, no, you don't do research into your enemies if you don't listen to them. Because if you can't sit through this, bro, I promise you, you have no fucking idea what's going on. But yes, if you can't follow very simple rules, such as don't say, if you listen to this, you'll lose brain cells. If you can't follow very simple rules, you don't belong here because you're not really serious about this and you obviously have no interest in learning, so you can show yourself the door. Goodbye. Fucking conservatives. Every single time. Anyway, what I was going to say, before I was rudely interrupted with conservative bullshit, is that this lady is frustrating to me because it's like she's talking about things that are real problems. I'm like, okay, I can get on board with this. I can get on board with this. I can get on board with it, Stacey. I'm with you. And then she's like, white supremacy, intersectionality, colonialism. And I'm like, no, Stacey, no. And then she's like, did you know that the first lynchings occurred with white parents lynching their own children? I was like, that's actually really fascinating. Tell me more about that, because I had no idea. That's actually a real thing. And then she's like, and then they use that to perpetuate systemic racism against Black people. And I was kind of like, okay, but like, why would they just all of a sudden stop lynching their own children and start lynching Black children instead? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Why were they lynching their own kids in the first place? I mean, like, I'm not saying it's good. I don't endorse it. I don't co-sign it or anything, but like, what happened? So it's like, I feel very up and down with her. This is like a roller coaster for me. For some things, I'm like, yes, I'm on board with this. And then I'm like, nope, now you've gone full leftist. Never go full leftist.
Christianity and other forms of state violence that continue to evolve over time. And so once I started going deeper into the archives, I began to see how whites modeled their treatment of Black people on their own barbaric treatment of their own children, right? So Black people became, through colonization and enslavement, became white people's new children. And so they only
Wait,
partially rescued white children.
what? Did you hear? That was like black children became white people's new children. Let's watch that again. That was like actually crazy. Hang on.
To see how whites modeled their treatment of black people on their own barbaric treatment of their own children. Right. So black people became, through colonization and enslavement, became white people's new children.
Through colonization and enslavement, black people became white people's new children. And that is why adult supremacy is a form of systemic racism. Because white people see black people as their new children because they've lynched all their own children apparently. And so now they have black people as their new children. And that is why adult supremacy is systemic racism. That really just cleared everything up. Great.
And so they only partially rescued white children from some of that violence. It's less public because you need them to grow up to perpetuate whiteness.
Much illumination will come from our deep dive. Indeed,
children, but because they're white. It's about preserving the future of whiteness. And so from this historical perspective, we see that Black youth have never and are never being denied childhood. And that's hard. When I say this, particularly in Black spaces, people like get real defensive about this. Like, what do you mean? Right?
Toby has to go last because of, hang on. Why does Toby have to go last? Does anyone have any thoughts on this? I know the answer to this. And if you ever watched that Democratic Socialist of America meeting, you know the answer to this. Why is it that we have to hear from Toby last? There is logic to this. The woke left don't hate men. They don't hate white people. They love white men who agree with them. But that still doesn't mean that Toby gets to go before the Black women. Why? Intersectional hierarchy, the woke oppression hierarchy, or progressive stack, where they deliberately put the Black women, and especially if you're a Black trans woman, first, followed by the indigenous people, followed by most of the time Latinx, followed by most of the time Asian, followed by most of the time Jew. And then if you have men, women, trans, gay, whatever, there's other intersectional things going on. But all this means, progressive stack, exactly, Dragon Water, the most oppressed go first. And even though they have no ill will towards Toby, just because he's a white man, that doesn't mean he's going to go first. He's going to go last.
I present this because there's so much that Black parents, and I don't have children, and so people are already resistant to me talking about parenting. You know, and so here I come with another layer of analysis.
I call it the woke oppression hierarchy. So that might be where you got it from, Reagan.
It's not because they're
I refuse to call it progressive stack.
But rather that they are victims of the category of childhood itself, which has long existed as a space of exploitation and brutality. When we place childhood, conceptions of childhood, and we look at the evolutionary history of childhood, we understand that childhood has long existed as a space of exploitation and brutality. The same is true of Black people more generally. So age is a moot point. Dominant racist narratives have always infantilized Black people, referring to them as a child race and conceptualizing them as perpetual children. So Black people get caught in a continuous limbo of childhood. They never escape it. Our bodies grow. We get bigger, we get old, right? But we never grow up. So it's not a trivial fact for when Black people are defined as children, it naturalizes and therefore justifies the cruelties of slavery, segregation, mass incarceration, and police brutality. So one of the first steps in decolonizing Black parents, this is the last thing that my essay talks about, is decolonizing Black parenting, which means we have to understand the ways in which our, people of color especially, we have to understand how our conceptions of childhood, our relationships, and how we exist with our children were shaped by systems of oppression. And how we've internalized some of those.
It really is too bad how these people allow their commitment to solving real and legitimate problems get completely obfuscated and overshadowed by all the woke bullshit. I mean, I really do mean that, truly. I completely agree with Stacy that it is a problem that Black youth are treated completely differently in the criminal justice system than white youth. That is a real and legitimate problem. If she just focused on that, I would have no issue with it at all. And then she brings all this other intersectional garbage into it, and I'm like, I started on your team. You would have had my full support on this, and now you've gone down the fucking rabbit hole, and I don't actually think you care about the original problem anymore because you've obfuscated it through 19 levels of bullshit. It's just too bad. They'd solve so many more problems if they actually just focused on the problem.
Very toxic ideas and behaviors like a corporal punishment, for example. So like a lot of Black people will tell me that whipping children is a Black thing. And I always say, no, actually beating your child is one of the whitest things you can do to destroy them. When you understand the history of corporal punishment, where it comes from and how it got implanted into different cultures. And so one of the first steps that we need to consider in decolonizing Black parenting is to reframe our understanding of the conception of childhood. And that in pre-colonial cultures, we had our own conceptions of that. These different groups had their own conceptions of childhood, the way they talked about kids, the way they thought about them, the way they elevated them, the way they handled their bodies. So we need to really, those of us who are scholars, get back to try to understand how those pre-colonial peoples, interacted with their own children. And it's hard in some cases because a lot of these cultures weren't writing those things down, they were oral. And so childhood in America and throughout the Western world has never been a protected category. It's a perennial site of violence. And so we have to look at how for, 2,000 years, white people have used trauma through corporal punishment, toxic religiosity, treating children as property, exposing them to public
Toxic
terror to actualize and
religiosity.
ensure the future of white supremacy. The fact is, white supremacy, as I said before, requires the destruction of all children in myriad ways so that we can perpetuate these inequalities. So adultification, thanks to Mr. Rollo teaching me this, is actually protective because being an adult is a privileged position. The reason white youth are more protected is because they are treated like adults, or what he calls, this is a term I had to learn, I'm always learning some new term with him, proto-citizens, proto-adults, right? Did I get that right, Toby? Proto-citizens. And so they benefit from adultification. White children actually benefit from adultification. So when Black youth are targeted for violence, it is precisely because they are children. When Black adults are targeted for violence, it's because they are conceptualized also as children. And so that's basically what my my essay is about, and helping people understand that, some of the protections that white children experience, not because they're respected as children, but because they are future citizens. They are the future of whiteness. In a white supremacist society, there can be no mature Black adults. They are always children. And so Black youth are considered the children of children. So they're doubly doomed by their categorization as biological children, as well as offspring of an inferior race existing in a permanent condition of cultural infancy, lawlessness, criminality, all of this for whom coercive discipline and death are the only recourse. And I'll just close out by saying, having people think about this question. If infantilization already sets Black people up for violence and death, then adultification would have the opposite effect of undoing the infantilization and liberating Black people. If white supremacy is an attempt to undo the view that Black people can be adults, that they can achieve full adult responsible citizenship, what then would be the point of adultifying young people? It seems like it's an unnecessary step. So I'd like people to think about that. And then I'll just close by saying that and I say this in my essay, that the adultification thesis is both a mistaken and counterproductive trap, as I say in my title, because it perpetuates the myth of protective childhood, and it invites Black activists, researchers like myself, Black parents and communities to seek white protections for Black bodies. If anything, categorizing Black youth as children when all Black people are already considered and treated like perpetual children simply recapitulates the violent logic of slavery that denies the protections of childhood.
I agree with you, Yasmin.
And Black children are not abused, discriminated, and killed because police and other vigilantes fail to recognize them as children. They're not experiencing some sort of reverse hallucination in their brains. They're killed because they're Black. They are and always have.
Yeah,
been a
Toby's getting
threat to
ready. The glasses are
continuity of
on.
white
The glasses are.
supremacy.
Toby's like, my
Black
time has
children have
come.
always been treated as enemy combatants in the same brutal manner as their elders. Whether they are considered children or adults is completely irrelevant. So us calling on this country, on the government, teachers, whomever, to say and recognize that our children are children, categorizing Black children as children will never save them and protect them in a white supremacist society. So that's all I have to say.
Well, that was a lot of incredible. I think you put it out so beautifully, and I really appreciate it. And I'm sure a lot of folks listening are having their minds blown a bit. I look forward to seeing how it ripples. Thank you so much for all your work. And I really love that Toby supported that, because Toby has supported me a lot as well, and a lot of us. I feel like I almost want like a space. That was a lot. Do a little check-in. Is everyone doing okay on the panel?
Does everyone want a snack? Everyone want to get up, stretch, do a little dance?
So Toby, what does childing the world mean?
Yes, Toby.
Best
Now,
title
as a
ever. Wanted
as a reminder, Toby is an assistant professor of political science at, what was it, Lakewood University. So Toby is in charge of teaching your children when you send them to college. Let's just all keep that in mind. Hang on, I got a super chat coming in. She needs to look at children in Africa, Asia, and India. Well, I strongly doubt that's going to happen, Edamame, but thank you for the super chat.
The title of the book. And why is it so vital for collective liberation and justice? And I mean, Stacey just spoke to this a bit, but can you speak to some of the ways adult supremacy and childism it began over in Europe?
Childism.
Well, thank you, first of all, and for putting together the volume, Carla. I think it's really excellent. And thanks to the speakers, Nolika and Stacey. Stacey's conveniently left out all of the things she taught me, which is classic. But so I'm going to be quick here because my contribution is actually fairly simple, and I'll try to get to your question, Carla. And I'll try and leave as much time as I can for the audience, to the folks who are with us still. And thanks to the audience for showing up too. It's nice to see that we have so many fellow travelers asking these same questions and concerned about these same sorts of things. So I imagine childing to be something like a critical child-centered approach to issues of intergenerational justice, similar to how like queering and cripping approaches have sought to like interrogate the unnoticed, heteronormative, and ableist.
Is cripping like when people like are like purposefully identifying themselves as crippled? Oh God, we haven't heard a lot about this, but it happens. Beth, did you know you're a Crip? Beth, you're gonna love this. You can identify as Crip, and that means you're disabled, and that means like you got a lot of status in the woke oppression hierarchy. So we've heard this term. I've heard this term. So I've heard it a couple times. I've heard this term most recently with that collective in Western Massachusetts that's like, there is a collective in Western Massachusetts that is doing psychotherapy on trans and non-binary 3-year-olds. I'm not making that up. And one of their lead psychotherapists doing the psychotherapy on the trans and non-binary 3-year-olds identifies specifically as Crip. As in disabled. Yes, you are a Crip. Exactly. I think you can identify as Crip if you have chronic pain. It's a disability study thing. Because what they're doing is they're pushing back again on like normative society being able-bodied society, meaning people that like have full use of like all their like whatever. So if you're Crip, that means you are not able-bodied. So you're queering, you're identifying as like queer when you're Crip, I guess.
Assumptions that inform a lot of our cultural practices and
yes, Sin, you are also Crip.
And so
Congratulations.
childing, I imagine, is a way of looking at systems both historically and currently in ways that try to reveal the
Oh, Trupak, welcome. I'm new here, subscribed and very entertained. Well, welcome. You've chosen to jump into the deep end because this is Socialism Saturday. This is our more advanced stream. But welcome. You're more than happy to stay. Please ask questions if you have them. Socialism Saturday can be a little overwhelming. Don't let it scare you away. We do more. We do other stuff throughout the week. But this is like the flagship stream. So really glad you're here. Sit back, and I hope you enjoy the show.
How those systems exclude, dominate, and exploit the young. And so childing takes the child as its primary lens of analysis through which cultural beliefs and practices are evaluated. It's a critical approach because we're not assuming that the institutions that children that we're trying to include children into are innocent or even hospitable places for young people. By child-centered, I mean looking at how institutions treat the young because, and for no other reason, that they are young.
Hang on, got a super chat coming in from Kyle. Do autoimmune diseases count as crippled? LOL. I'm pretty sure you don't even have to have anything wrong with you to identify. I'm pretty sure you don't actually have to have anything wrong with you to identify as crippled. You just have to say you're crippled. Because you can be like, I have a massive anxiety disorder, even if you don't. Or I have ADHD, even if like you don't. Or I have autism, because a lot of these people are like self-diagnosed autistics, where they've never actually gotten an official autism diagnosis. So I'm pretty sure Crip is kind of like queer in that the only thing you need to do to be considered Crip is to say you're Crip. But if you have something legitimately wrong with you, that's probably better. If it's a physical disability, you'll probably have more status than if it's like a neurological one, but I don't know. We need to look into that more.
So childing the world is a goal. The goal is not to find ways to include or integrate or accommodate children into existing spaces that have been historically created by adults for adults, but to explore what our practices and institutions would look like if children were genuinely part of the process of creating them, or co-creating them rather. So for example, what would our economic or productive life look like if young people had a genuine say in how it's organized? And I'm pretty sure it wouldn't resemble anything like capitalism. Capitalism actually can only exist so long as children are either working in the factories themselves or sequestered in schools all day so that parents are freed up to participate as laborers.
Oh, really? Oh, really, Toby? Really? Capitalism can only exist if children are either working in factories or if they're in school all day so that parents can go work in the factories? Really? Do you know what I think that sounds like, Toby? I think that sounds like the best argument that I have ever heard of to get rid of the government schools. In fact, I think that the very best thing that we can do to fight capitalism in this country is to get rid of the government schools entirely. Therefore, the parents have no place to send the children when they're going to work in the factory. I think that this is possibly the best. In fact, I'm going to rewind this just to get a clip of it just while we're here, because this might be one of the most important things I've ever heard a socialist say on my streams. Capitalism is driven by children going to public school. I can play this game all day. All right, I'm just going to clip this, guys. I hope you don't mind. I'm just going to rewind and clip this real quick. Let me get my clipping machine configured. Say computer audio. All right, gonna clip this real quick. Oh, hang on. Oh, shit. Wrong monitor. Configure recording. The other monitor, please. There we go.
Institutions would look like if children were genuinely part of the process of creating them, or co-creating them rather. So for example, what would our economic or productive life look like if young people had a genuine say in how it's organized? And I'm pretty sure it wouldn't resemble anything like capitalism. Capitalism actually can only exist so long as children are either working in the factories themselves or sequestered in schools all day so that parents are freed up to participate as laborers. So capitalism cannot exist without the subordination of children and sequestering and detention of children in particular institutions, or if they're working as well. But
beautiful.
It might
beautiful. That might be one of the most beautiful clips that I've ever gotten in the history of Socialism Saturday. I'll rig that up later. Fucking beautiful, Toby. Thank you. Thank you for that gift that you gave me tonight. The Red Wolf, thank you for the super chat. What do people of this mindset think will happen if they get this ideology implemented? Seriously, they learn this in higher learning? Oh yeah. Well, I mean, they're teaching this in K through 12 now. They start dripping out this ideology starting in like elementary school now. But what they believe is that if we get rid of capitalism, we're going to have Marxism, and under Marxism, everything will be taken care of, and the government will take care of all our needs, and you won't have to work. They are very against work. We need to do a whole series at some point listening to their anti-work lectures, because they are very, very against having a job. They want the government to provide your food, your housing, your education, obviously, except Toby seems to say that the government providing education upholds capitalism. So I don't know how that squares up. But they want the government to, like, it is quite literally, you will own nothing and you will be happy. Like, you will have no private property. They want to abolish all private property. They want to abolish the biological family. They want the state to control everything, including the raising of the children, because they don't think the children should be raised by their parents. They think the children should be raised by the collective. And they think that this is going to free everyone up to live happier and fuller lives. And everyone is going to get to be an artist. And when you need food, you go to the community kitchen, because they want to get rid of kitchens in private households. I'm not kidding. We've heard them say that. And everyone goes to the community kitchen. So all your basic needs are provided for, and your healthcare is provided for. And the state will provide you a place to live, and the state will provide you a car if you're deemed to need one, because not everyone's going to need one, because they're going to build these 15-minute cities that you don't even need a card if you're in the 15-minute city to go and get whatever you need, because it's going to be within like a 15-minute bike ride or public transportation or whatever the F. So they really think it's like the you will own nothing and you will be happy thing. That's a real thing for them. You're welcome. Let me see. Stephen B, thank you for the super chat, Stephen B. I do appreciate it. Guys, you are watching Socialism Saturday. We do this on Saturdays at 6 p.m. We watch real live socialists from start to finish. We let them say whatever they want to say, and we talk about it. Please do mount that like button for me. If you have not mounted it already, mounting the like button lets people know to come into the stream to join us, and makes it more likely that YouTube is going to serve my content. And if you have not yet subscribed to my channel, I hope you will subscribe today and join us on a regular basis. I also might be doing a stream later where I watch Nick Fuentes on Fresh and Fit. Might be doing it later, might do it tomorrow. We're gonna have to see how it goes. I'm kind of leaning towards doing a late night stream though, like later, because like Nick Fuentes at midnight on a Saturday night, like what could possibly go wrong? But we're gonna focus on this for now. We have about half an hour left of this presentation. I hope you're enjoying the show. Let's keep going.
Not resemble socialism either. We don't really know because we have never actually involved the youth in the formation of our economic or productive organization. So we could also ask what education would look like.
You're fine. You're cool.
Like anything like state schooling.
I appreciate you sticking around.
Most importantly, I think is the question of what collective decision making or governance or law would look like if youth were
No
genuinely
shit.
involved.
Does he
And here
really?
Again, I'm pretty sure it would not look anything like mass
keep an eye on that,
elections and
Yasmin.
political parties, sovereign states, and borders. It probably looked vastly different from those sorts of things. So Childing the World presents a kind of radical productive critique of existing systems in much the same way as critical approaches we see exemplified in critical race theory, queer theory, decolonial theory, disability
he's just
studies.
connected all the woke bullshit
The
into
difference
this,
here is
hasn't
that
he?
the child is the starting point, and I think this is important for two reasons. I'll be very quick here. The first is that the fields of critique I just mentioned, the critical race theory, critical disability theory, take up the very real and very important issue of children being oppressed because they're a particular kind of child. So a child of color, an indigenous youth, an LGBTQ plus youth, or a child with disabilities. So these are crucial areas of critique and activism. But we also need an analysis, and we're sadly lacking an analysis of children's exclusion and domination because they are children. Related to this is the second reason I think a child-centered approach is vital, and Stacey's kind of already touched on this in depth, is because the very idea of childhood itself is a space of naturalized subordination to adults, and it provides a model and a framework for the subordination of countless other groups. So if it's right, for example, to keep children out of politics because they're inexperienced or irrational, then anyone we want to exclude, we can simply stereotype as lacking sufficient experience or rationality. We can label them as childish or childlike, and now we have a justifiable, legitimate form of exclusion we can apply to those people. So this is the logic behind the exclusion of people of color, as Stacey has pointed out, the child races. It's also the logic behind the treatment of indigenous peoples as wards of the state. It's the logic behind the exclusion of women who have been labeled as emotionally infantile or childishly irrational. It's the logic of excluding peoples with disabilities because they've not fulfilled a human being's alleged natural trajectory from a child to an adult, so they remain in some way a permanent and perpetual child. So it's important to challenge the model of childhood exclusion because so long as it remains, other people can be excluded on the grounds that they are like children. So I think this is really key because if we struggle for the equality and inclusion of groups, arguing that they should not be treated like children, as the first wave feminists did, arguing that they were just as capable as men of being mature and rational and should therefore have the same rights as men, then we actually preserve and reinforce the original logic of exclusion. So put another way, if our rallying cry is that we should be treated like adults, not children, then we are affirming that poor treatment is unavoidable and natural for children. And so long as we preserve that space of naturalized and normalized domination, we are all potentially ensnared in its logic, right? We can all find ourselves potentially labeled as childish or childlike and then subjected to the abuses deemed appropriate for a child. So Childing the World, a child-centered critical lens of analysis, is necessary to examine and transform not just the institutions we know are a source of harm to vulnerable peoples, states and capitalism, things like this, but also the way we sometimes unwittingly strengthen those institutions when we think we're actually challenging them.
Thank you so much, Toby. That's Childing the World.
Great. Is it all right to kind of come in with some questions from the audience?
Oh, the Q&A is always the best part. Q&A, the reason that the Q&A is the best part of any of these presentations is, so up until this point, they have pretty much had like prepared remarks, except for the first woman who talked, who just did it off the cuff and it was really weird. But they really get thrown off their game, and they tend to say the quiet part out loud a lot more in the Q&A. So this is really the best part to listen to. But I do want to take this super chat from Joshua. They have really nice houses. Thank you, Carlin, for all that you cover. It's so needed. I do appreciate that, Joshua. I try to do my very best, and I appreciate the support. All right. Oh, well, Mustard Seed, I'm glad you asked this. When they have these discussions, do you think they create their own socialist bingo card with their word salad of terms? I wonder if they give each other snaps when they get bingo. I don't think they do that, but we do that. And if you have not yet downloaded your socialist bingo card, I shared these at the beginning of the show, but you may not have been here. We do have our own Socialism Saturday bingo card, and I just popped it in the chat. There's still plenty of time to get a bingo if people want to take advantage of that. So we do actually have that as well. And then Rottweiler in for the super chat, right? And who were Mao's Red Guard? The children they indoctrinated for years prior. What happened to Mao's Red Guard? He did away with them later. They're all useful idiots that will be put against the wall the minute their little socialist revolution takes place, and they don't know enough about their own damn history to know that's the truth. All right, guys, let's get into the Q&A because this is the best part.
All right.
Absolutely.
We've gotten a ton of really excellent questions, some of which are responses to things that have already been said, some of which are whole new directions. We're not going to be able to get to all of these questions, and I'm sorry about that because I would love to. But we could just start right at the top. Somebody submitted a question about the relationship between adultism and ageism, or the kind of the oppression of the young and the oppression of the old, and whether or not these two forms of oppression might have something in common or some relation to each other. And I'm not sure if anybody feels up for tackling that. It seemed like a really interesting question.
I can say something about that. So ageism is a real serious issue. And we are lucky to have recourse for people who are elderly. We have laws against the abuse of elders, right? We have institutions in place to help elders who are suffering from age-related, degradations in intellectual, cognitive, and physical capacities and things like this. So we're lucky actually to have recourse for ageism as directed towards older people. So we should be fortunate, we should be thankful for that. Unfortunately, in a large number of Western countries, we do not have the same protections for children. So it's illegal to hit old people. It is not illegal to hit children. It is not illegal to sequester children, to detain children, to force children to do any number of things with their bodies. There is absolutely no legal recourse unless you basically leave a bruise on a child to follow up and to protect children. So while ageism is a very important and serious issue, and it is related to adult supremacy, there are at least protections that we still need to fortify for older folks. There's a much larger and much more distance to go when it comes to protecting young people.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on what Toby was saying, because I do a lot of work on corporal punishment, it is codified in law in every single state, defining how you can appropriately strike a child's body. So you can hit a child one way in Texas and it's okay. Do the same thing in Vermont, you might go to jail. There are 19 states which still allow paddling of public school children. Most of those are in the South. The top 10 paddling states are also were the top 10 lynching states. Every state, with the exception of New Jersey and Iowa, allows corporal punishment of children in private and charter schools. We don't know how widespread the issue is because those schools don't have to report their numbers to the Office of Civil Rights. So this is a question of bodily integrity. So once you reach adulthood and move along the age spectrum to being an elderly person, you still have the right to bodily autonomy in ways that children actually don't. Children don't have to, we don't need children's consent to touch their bodies in this way. They can't say no to a school teacher or a principal or a parent. It's illegal to hit adults, even a dog, but for kids, it's sort of defined as for their own good.
Can I add something really quickly too? We have to be mindful how we keep centering ourselves as adults. And I think like this question, and well-intentioned, I think about it often, it comes up, right? That's somewhere we have to just be like critically, constantly practicing not centering ourselves in these conversations. And part of that is like, yeah, we're all going to go into old age, you know what I mean? And trying to figure, my grandmother would say, once a man, twice a child. It's like the same, you know, this kind of thing. And in our language and everything, I just want to kind of just like put that out there as part of what also happens for us is like, well, what as an adult, how am I still the victim, or how am I going to still be victimized in the future? And like, that's not the problem. You know what I mean? Like we have to own our power. If we do not recognize that we have all the power in the situation, we can not create the change, right? Like it's someone else is going to do it. It's happening to us too. I kind of just wanted to add that a little bit to the conversation.
Thanks, y'all. Those were great answers. Another question that was submitted in the Q&A, which I think is a great one, given everything that has been shared tonight, is just a question of practically what we can be doing in our daily lives to confront adult supremacy. And I realize this is like the infamous, like, all right, we've learned that everything is rotten. Tell us what to do now. But I think it is an important question also, is like, there's some practical things that people who work with or share homes with young people with children can be doing to actualize this.
Ask kids.
I was gonna say, listen.
I think, and I also want to say something like, that came up, Carla, you mentioned it, and I have no idea, not like in the chats, but like people talking about like, why aren't children part of this conversation, or like, how do you bring kids in? Recognize that spaces that are populated by adults are not safe for children. And I think like that is something you can immediately like do, is just like being willing to look at like your environments, and you know, like, what is the ratio of adult to child in any type of thing? Being able to look at the segregation that we all propagate, like how we all, you know, my kids are always mad when adults come over because there's like this way that they just want to section off, like they want to be, and like they're like, when you see that happening around gender, it's problematic. When you see it happening around race, it's problematic. It's also problematic when you see it happening around children and like adults. I think this is my wheelhouse, the practicality. I want to say this is like what to do. Let me tell you some things you can be doing. I think the other thing you can do, what any dominant group can do, really the only thing you can do is provide cover. And like in practical ways, that looks like when your child's like, I don't feel like going to school today, call the school and tell them they're sick. You know, when your child's like, you know, I'm uncomfortable going to, like, I don't really feel like being around that aunt or that family member, don't go to the dinner. Like, provide fucking cover. That's what our job is. Like, and if you want to see models of how to do it, like, look to, you know, I'm an emergent strategy, like something that I'm really into, and like I consider myself an emergent strategist. Look to like the animals, you know what I'm saying? Like, look, like what all is happening in how, you know, animals care for their young. And are you doing that? You know, just give and only give. Don't expect any.
Dude, there are animals who eat their young. Are you serious? We should be taking parenting advice from animals? I mean, what could possibly go wrong with that plan, socialist? What could possibly go wrong with feeding your kid for like a couple of weeks and then saying, "You are on your own, Junior. Go forth and Did Wow.
Anything
This person wrote a book. I just want everyone to know that, like, if you want to write a book, like, I don't know why anyone would. I've written 2 books and it sucks. The whole process sucks, and I'll probably write 6 or 7 more before I'm done. But but it really does suck. It's like hard. It's a really hard thing to do. But if you want to write a book and you feel like you can't because it's intimidating, or you're not smart enough, or you don't have anything important to say, I really just want you to keep in mind that the person speaking right now has written a book, at least one book that they're talking about right now. And she literally just said that parents should take parenting advice from animals and that we should treat our children as the animals do. You can do anything you put your mind to, guys. You really can. You don't need to be the smartest. You don't need to be the best. You don't need to be the brightest. You just need to believe that you can do it. That's it.
back. They're not giving you anything back. They don't need to. Like, you know what I mean? And I think like those are things I'm really excited. I am too with the podcast, like wanting to engage with people who are not parents around this conversation, because we are all parenting children. We are all engaging with children. We are all part of this, what is happening. And I think that is the part. And I will say the other, like, I mean, I can go on and on and on, but I would say, be honest about your childhood experience. Like, be honest about how you were, like how you experienced childhood, so you could recognize how that is impacting how you're engaging with children now. If you were told and did not like I always say, like, my kids are always like, why do adults hate teenagers so much? What did teenagers do to adults? And I was like, because they didn't like themselves as teenagers. You know, and part of the reason they didn't like themselves as teenagers, I think, I didn't study this, that's not my I'm not academic, is because of that adultification, like that, I do think of this as like a spectrum, right? Like any other kind of identity. And when you hit adolescence and you have to decide, am I going to abandon childhood or am I going to move into adulthood? And what conflicts that brings up for you and how you engage with other, it's messy business. It's messy business. And I think there has to be some feeling around like how we betrayed ourselves during those times that kind of continue to fester in how we engage with children, and how we engage with adolescents. And so, yeah, I'll stop. But if you want more, the podcast is there, and yes, keep asking. Yeah.
I think that we also need to put, like, there's a lot of people who are trying to be anti-racist, and they try to speak up when they see racism, hear it in their own families, in social media spaces, yada, yada, yada. There are even groups like, you can tag the white nonsense roundup people if somebody comes on your thread and they're saying these sorts of things. I think we need to have a similar approach to calling out childism and these everyday prejudices when we see them articulated against children. I do it on social media all the time. So when I see videos of children being shamed by parents, when people are sticking video cameras in their faces, watching children have meltdowns, and I'm like, well, how would you like it if somebody did that? I'm always that nag there who's just destroying everybody's joy and pleasure around the suffering and shame of children. Calling out language, like when people are like, Donald Trump is so childish. And I'm like, stop slandering children. Like, you're using that word childish, you're basically saying that there's something wrong with children, their natural way of being. No, Donald Trump is a whole different mess of pathos that has nothing to do with childhood. Well, maybe his own distorted childhood and trauma that he experienced at the hands of his, degenerate family members, but that's a whole nother His niece wrote a book about it. Y'all just read her book.
So it was okay for Donald Trump to be abused during childhood. Is that what you're saying, Stacey? It was totally cool for Donald Trump to be abused during childhood with his piece of work mother, which we all know is the case. Donald Trump's mother made him a narcissist, all right? And I'm not taking that back. And that's totally fine because it's Donald Trump and he's white and privileged. But it's not okay for any other kid to be abused during childhood, just Donald Trump.
Tell you. But it's like calling this stuff out when you see it. You know, like if I see somebody hitting a child in public, I call it out. I respond the same way if I would see a man slapping a woman around or vice versa. I'm not going to say, oh, I just need to mind my business because that's a child. I'm not going to call the cops because that's a child. You know, it's just perpetuating, you know, that exclusion, all this exclusive stuff that we've been talking about. So I just find ways, and then checking your own self, like your own ideas about children, how you view them. Like me, when I see kids, I always feel like an anthropologist or a child psychologist. I just sit back and I stare and I study, and I'm like, I wonder why they're doing that. And I almost want to get on the floor with them and try to like crawl with them or just follow them around to see where this is going to take them, right? What journey are we going to go on? Instead of like many of the adults in the room who are like, that child needs to be beaten, or these kids today are horrible, you know, and just checking people's analysis around kids. So one quick example. So one guy on social media was telling me, so I was talking about, you know, the harms that hitting children has on their brain development and so on and so forth. And so he was like, see, it's this kind of thinking that has got these kids today killing their parents. And I said, oh, I'm going to have fun with this one. You've fallen into my trap. And so I pulled FBI data or on parricide, which is children killing parents. It's very rare. It's like less than 0.4% of all homicides are parents, kids killing their parents. And something like 90% of those murders are done by adults killing their parents, not actual children. So, you know, I had to screenshot the chart and everything. So when we call out this stuff, we also have to traffic in data. We have to traffic, if you're talking about psychological harms, physical harms, in the science, what does the science say? And be fearless about clapping back against religious ideas, these very toxic religious ideas about children. You know, I'll go so far as to say, well, why would I take advice from somebody who, you know, ordered children to be drowned, sacrificed on altars, you know, set his own son up to be lynched to save us all, you know, just depending on my mood. The goal for me is about centering kids and being a voice to advocate for them. Because if we don't do this, and there's so few of us doing this, these toxic ideas abound. And because we don't have laws in place to protect kids, all of this conversation in these digital spaces, the preaching, the joking, the videos, all of this naturalizes and normalizes this violence against kids, which produces more generations of traumatized people who grow up to keep perpetuating all
Stacey
of this.
needs therapy. She needs to go work out her mommy and daddy
Thank
issues
you.
in therapy. She really does.
I have a lot to say, but I'm noticing the time. You can check out me and my teens podcast called Grounded Futures, where he talks about this a lot.
She does a podcast with her teenager.
How adults can show up really, really well and trust.
She does a podcast with her teenager about abolishing adult supremacy. Carla has to go to therapy. Like, this is mentally unhinged. I'm sorry. That's weird.
And believe in, yeah, I think we could move on to another question.
Okay, yeah, we may only have time for one more question.
Okay.
And there's still a bunch of really good ones. I can pull one, or if anybody else is looking at the Q&A and saw something that they really wanted to make sure we addressed, definitely jump in right now, because otherwise I think we're going to run out of time for it. So a juicy one that has come up is the question of to what extent like the institution of the family is actually sort of implicated in all of this. And I guess, yeah, and I think, you know, the person who asked did not say the nuclear family, but certainly the
They
nuclear
hate the
family
nuclear-
is in the mix.
Oh,
So I would love to hear what y'all think about how the idea of the family is sort of a perpetuating force.
Remember, I told you this was all about abolish the family bullshit. I told you. It always comes back. Remember, for people who are new, this is literally in the Communist Manifesto that they want to abolish the biological family, but the nuclear family is the most problematic because it is the most normative. So we've just walked into crazy town. This is why we do this. Mandatory carry, working but keep fighting. Thank you, Mandatory carry. I really do appreciate it. Rottweiler says Carla is a narcissist. Her son is her extension. I think that is probably the truth, Rottweiler. Very astute there. All right, I just want to back up and I want to get the full question again. How is the idea of the family perpetuating adultism? Okay, I just want to get the whole thing. Sophie Lewis is going to be so proud of us.
So a juicy one that has come up is the question of to what extent like the institution of the family is actually sort of implicated in all of this. And I guess, yeah, and I think, you know, the person who asked did not say the nuclear family, but certainly the nuclear family is in the mix. So I would love to hear what y'all think about how the idea of the family is sort of a perpetuating force behind adultism.
Oh my God, I want to hear from everybody, but I first want to say that
they all get so
we need more
excited, Doug.
family, we need more kin, we need more expansion of what it means, what it looks like. I'm not really into
Okay, I want to make sure I really explain something. When they say the family, what they want to do is they want to redefine the family from being your biological family to a family of choice. Has anyone heard the term family of choice before? And essentially it's actually like not a nefarious term on its own. Like the idea of a family of choice is that sometimes people don't have good relationships with their biological family. They just don't get along. It's just the way it goes. And so instead, they surround themselves with people who are not biologically related to them, but that become their family of choice. So it's like your best buddies, your roommates, your things like that, okay? It's not an inherently bad thing, but what these people want to do is they want, street family, exactly, chosen family, exactly. But what these people want to do is they want to shift the family unit that we think of in society, the normative family unit, the biological family, they want to shift that to being the family of choice, being the normative family unit. And this might include things like gay families. It might include things like polyamorous families. It might include things like just a whole bunch of people getting a house together. It could include any number of things, but it's like they are not biologically related kin that are living together. A community. Some might say a commune. Exactly. But that is the goal of these people. They want to get rid of the biological family and replace it with relationship, like communal relationship sort of thing. Because then once they get rid of those biological ties, your first affinity is going to be to the state. And guess what? If you start forming these little communal societies, how easy would it be for the state to say, you don't live here anymore, you live over here now? because you don't have any biological ties to hold you together.
To the whole abolish family. I'm into abolishing or decentering the nuclear family, decentering it. But no, we need more making kin, more than ever, of what it means to like be in kinship together. So I just wanted to really start from that place. However, and then I think Toby has actually taught me a lot about
Hang on. Am I saying that gay families are not families or no, not at all. Not at all. I have no problem with gay families. I don't care if you're fucking gay. And in fact, so they actually think, okay, so who has heard the term homonormativity? This is a we haven't talked about this term much. I've talked about it a couple times on my Substack. We maybe have done a stream here and there. Homonormativity is when two gay people fall in love and they get married and then they have kids and then they live in the house with the white picket fence with their kids and the dog. That's what homonormativity is. Homonormativity is the idea that gay people create the same kind of like family structures as like straight people do. And homonormativity for these people is considered bad. They do not want gay people getting married in a monogamous two-person relationship, having kids, settling down, having a job, participating in capitalism. All that is considered bad. So this is not a matter of like gay or straight or anywhere in between. It's not a matter of that at all. It is a matter of them wanting to destroy what we consider to be the normative family. Exactly. They don't like gay families or gay marriage because they assimilate into heteronormativity and it reinforces the thing they're trying to abolish. Beautifully put, Ellie. Really great work. Queer ideology is not gay. Exactly. Yes. You do not like do not confuse queer ideology with being gay or lesbian or bisexual or even being a trans person, because it's not the same thing. Queer ideology is a far left political ideology. It is not a sexual orientation. It is not a gender identity. It is a far left political ideology. I am laughing at what their ideas are as you explain it and my eyes open to it to avoid crying. Well, that's why we do Socialism Saturday with alcohol. All right? If we don't laugh, we'll cry, but that's what we're here for. Rottweiler, the family unit is an obstacle to the state and the party. That's exactly right. Think about all the dystopian movies that you've ever seen. 1984, they were trying to abolish the family. Like the best party members didn't actually have a family. They didn't have kids. They were trying to get rid of all biological births. They were trying to do birth via artificial insemination. Brave New World, they didn't have families. What was it? Logan's Run, no families. The Giver, they had assigned families, but they still had all kids being born in a birthing center. Every single dystopian fiction, well, at least the big ones, have completely gotten rid of the biological family because the biological family is the primary obstacle to collectivism and the state and being loyal to the party. Fun times. And this is why Abolish the Family is our favorite dystopian topic.
They go together, the formation of the nuclear family with this childism stuff. There's I think an intersection in history, but maybe you could speak to.
We won't tell anyone.
Yeah, I'm with you, Carla. I think
good for
we
you
need
for not
bigger,
partaking.
Bigger and greater families with more kids running around and everybody just being okay with it. And the nuclear family, I mean, it's an outgrowth of a particular way of looking at children. It's got a long history.
College
so
professor.
It's got its problems, but I can't. If some people choose it, that I'm it's fine. As an institution, capitalism loves it, but so it's got its problems. But
Capitalism loves the nuclear family.
I've had this thought recently, thinking a lot about this idea of chosen family and, nuclear family and how people pull away from extended family and what all that looks like. And I think that sometimes it's like a question to ask, like, why does that happen? And I do think that when you are trying to walk this line or like trying to move away from adult supremacy, it becomes really hard to be around other adults, whether they're your family, chosen fam, like whoever.
Well, hang on. The only dystopian story with families is the Hunger Games. That is a great point, Catherine. But guess what they did in the Hunger Games, didn't they? Because I'm kind of obsessed with the Hunger Games. I love the Hunger Games. I thought the Hunger Games was so good. There were times in the Hunger Games when biological family members were pitted against each other, weren't there? I mean, the whole beginning to the Hunger Games was biological family members quite literally being pitted against each other in the form of like Prin got selected to be in the Hunger Games, and then Katniss has a choice where she's either like, do I save my sister or do I save myself? That's like pitting the two of them against each other. There was also that brother-sister team in the second Hunger Games that were quite literally pitted against each other in the Hunger Games. So in the Hunger Games, they had families fighting families to bend to the will of the state. I don't think the Hunger Games would have been upset at all if they had gotten rid of the biological family. I think they probably would have tried at some point.
Whoever the heck these people are. And I think in that centering of childing, I love this childing idea, by the way, Toby. I'm really into it. And I think that as you are thinking about the childing of anything, there's a desire to have this like romanticized, like, oh, we could all be running through, everybody's taking the village and we're all taking care of the kids. And it is really hard to find people, adults, who are willing to give up their power and be in community with children. Mm-hmm. I mean, we may be like, I don't know the percentages, but the alienation that comes with what you're talking about, and like holding people accountable for how they talk to children, how social media, another thing some people can do is like really examine how you are sharing your children on social media. Yes. What are you saying about them?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I tell my friends this all the time.
Thank you, Beth.
Everybody
Queen
knows this.
Beth
like,
of the chat.
I don't like being around people and their children. Like, it is cringy for me. I think that it's probably cringy for other people to be around me and my children for different reasons. But I think and part of it is like, I could really love these people and really love their children, but how we have been conditioned to think about children is really hard. It's like, it's really hard for me to be around people who think about gender in a particular way. Like, it's really hard to constantly have to like queer it. Like, it's here, people just like have these binary ways of thinking about things. And so I don't know if this speaks to the family question, but I do think that part of family is both can be a place of healing, and it can also be a place of intense like trauma and intense like oppression. And so there is a role to play, but you got to be like really ready for that. And and it looks like, again, cover. It looks like who is willing to come in here and be the cover these people who are really like, I mean, I say all the time, like all these issues, all these problems, everything that's going wrong, global warming, climate change, politics, children could fix all the shit real quick, real quick. If we allow that,
children will
be
fix
how
everything.
we move through the world.
The children will save us all.
We're just not willing to give up our power in order to let that happen. So yeah.
And just real quickly to piggyback off of
Nolika. It's me. Yeah.
I'm a stutterer sometimes, so things don't always come out smoothly. The best group of kids to ask this question to are adoptees and foster kids. I'm an adoptee and a former foster kid, and growing up with my brothers and sisters in the system, and having our biological families or foster families mistreat us sometimes, we had to develop a different understanding of family. And sometimes we formed family with each other.
It's because she's emotionally stunted, right? That's the problem. She's emotionally stunted.
We protected each other. We looked out. Some were in gangs. Some formed families sort of fictive kin within confinement, juvenile justice systems, foster care systems. And, for me, it was boarding school to escape foster care. But then I became this young adult who was out in the world having my sense of identity not really intact, because I was still holding on to these socialized conceptions of what a normal, healthy family was supposed to be for me. And because I didn't have that as a young person, I was walking around lost and full of grief and feeling like there was something wrong with me because I didn't have that socially constructed idea of what family was, right? And so as I got therapy and I've created this village, I have like all these village mamas and daddies that I chose, who loved and nurtured me and, brought me back to health and thrivance. I had to reconceptualize family. And I learned that sometimes family, well, there's a huge difference between relatives and family. Huge difference, right? And sometimes the best and only gift that your parents can give you is to be the vessel to get you onto this earth to fulfill whatever ancestral mandate that you're supposed to be fulfilling. And so I think this is a question, we need to integrate youth voices on, in this discussion to help us see how they perceive family and how it's changed, because we now are in an era where there's a little bit more acceptance of non-traditional, family structures and so on. And so we've got at least a generation of young people, some young people who've grown up in, different family settings. And we need to hear more about their experiences and what family means to them altogether.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Stacey. I also want to say, I abolished my own family because of the abusive home and to take cover over my kin. So there is,
that's nice.
It's not a binary.
That's always complicated.
Well, y'all, this has been just an incredibly rich conversation. And for folks who haven't already picked up the book, I will say that this is the tip of the iceberg in terms of all the brilliant and inspiring content in Trust Kids. So definitely do pick up the book, but also find all of these folks, all these panelists, follow them, listen to their podcasts, buy their books.
Kind of was thinking the same thing.
There's so much more to this conversation, and I really wish that this was part 1 of 10. But unfortunately, our time tonight has come to an end. So thank you so much to everybody who joined in. I really enjoyed this, and I know all of our guests did as well.
Well, guys, that was a banner episode of Socialism Saturday, if I've ever seen one. I hope you guys learned a lot about how crazy these people are. Again, this was off of a YouTube channel that I literally found an hour before I was supposed to go live on the stream. And I have a feeling we're going to be watching, a lot more content from Firestorm Co-op. Thank you for your service, Firestorm Co-op, because they've got so much crazy shit on this channel. Sometimes you just hit treasure troves like this on YouTube, where you'd find these small little socialist bookstore YouTube channels that with videos that only have 100 views or something like that. And it's just the biggest goal. And they were actually kind of speaking in plain English. This wasn't the worst socialist translation we've ever had to do. It was understandable. And then so we're going to spend some time here. This might become our new Red May. We've kind of exhausted the content of Red May. And so maybe we'll spend some time here. Although, hang on, let me show you guys this. This is actually really exciting. Our friends over at Haymarket Books have something coming up real soon, where Haymarket Books on July 16th, in but seven days. Guys, will that be on a Saturday? Will we do a Socialism Saturday early edition? Is that actually on July? Is that actually on the? Hang on, is that a Sunday? Might be a Sunday. Sunday. Never mind. It's a Sunday. We might do Socialism Sunday. Anyway, our friends over from Haymarket Books next Sunday at 2 p.m. are doing Transgender Marxism live. I just can't resist stream sniping our favorite socialist book publisher. So we'll have more about that coming up soon. But guys, I do hope you enjoyed Socialism Saturday. This is when we watch real socialism and we talk about it. And of course, if you enjoyed my work, please consider, first of all, everyone should be subscribed to my Substack, because I will lay out what the woke left is doing. I will tell you the most important things you need to know. I will break down the ideology in plain English. I will write you things that you can share with your friends and family. Last night, I posted this here article about equity being Marxism, and I know most of you know that. But what I've done in this article is not only explain to you in clear and no uncertain terms what it is, I've also given you resources. So there are a couple of videos that you can watch in the equity article that are Harrison Bergeron. Both the short movie that was made a couple years ago and then the long form TV movie. These are excellent resources to teach people about this. This is the type of stuff I provide on my Substack for you guys. This one is free, but some of my content is premium. And if you do appreciate the work I'm doing, the very, 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 very best thing you can do is become a subscriber on my Substack for $5 a month or for $50 a year. And I will be raising the price to $8 a month or $80 a year at the end of this month. But if you sign up as a supporter at $5 a month, $50 a year now before the end of the month, then you're going to get it at that level. You'll be grandfathered in, and that'll just be the way it is, and that's cool with me, man. So, but I am 100% completely funded by you. I cannot do this without you. You guys allow me to spend my time breaking down the ideology, understanding it, searching around the internet for random small little YouTube channels like our new friends at Firestorm Co-op, because that all takes time. And the biggest luxury that I have right now is not money, it's time. Like, and it is at a premium. And so the more you guys support my work, the more time I have, because I have to pay my mortgage somehow. And so if I'm not doing this, I'm doing other things to pay my mortgage, stuff like that. So guys, I will be back. Like I said, I think I'm actually just going to take a little bit of a break, and we might do a late night Nick Fuentes stream tonight, maybe about an hour or so, just to be saucy. But I am going to take a little bit of a break. I might be back later tonight. If not, then I will see you guys when I see you. And Zuzu, I just became a yearly member. Thank you, Zuzu. I do appreciate that. Awesome, awesome, awesome. All right, guys, we will see you soon. Bye.